Shoot, whenever, ready when you are.
All right, well, let's do this then, man. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today. So I'd like to start off because you are one of the hosts of a Stranger by the Hour podcast,
Yep.
and we had Aaron on before, and we didn't get to plug the podcast, or we didn't plug the podcast till the end, which a lot of people may not have gotten to that. So I want to give you the opportunity up front to plug your guys' podcast before we get into your career, as an infantryman
Okay.
and MARSOC and EOD and all that stuff.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So, Aaron and I started the Stranger by the Hour podcast about a little over a year ago now. And it was actually right before, the pandemic hit. We were kind of talking about it, both of us are getting kind of over the whole contracting gig,
Yeah.
It's kind of like Groundhog Day. So, we were just kind of talking about it. And, as far as like MARSOC goes, there's not a lot of guys putting stuff out, right? I mean, there was Golembeski put out a book, and of course, not being a critical skills operator, he I think he took he takes flack from certain aspects of the command, right? Like, oh man, some enabler wrote a book kind of thing, but like nobody really talks about it. And for better or for worse, whether anybody likes us or not, which is we're plank holders of MARSOC. We've been there since day one. We had to come down from the shooting package for them to unfurl the flag. And so initially, we were going to talk about that a little bit, but what we were really interested in was, I geek out over ancient history, things like the pyramids, the unexplainable architecture kind of stuff. And that was really why it was going to be called Stranger by the Hour, which we're going to talk about strange things, sort of like a paranormal, esoteric, occult, knowledge, kind of, hidden meanings, symbolism kind of stuff. We were just gonna, just kind of talk about stuff that we were interested in, and so we started off kind of slow, and then as the world just seemed to get super strange, man, then we're just like, the hell with it. We're gonna discuss what we see going on around us as if we were looking at it as military planners, because we are military planners, like. And we both work within information operations now, so we basically talk about what we see as the overarching narrative that's presented to, your normal populace, and we pick that narrative apart like we're looking at an enemy information operation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
That's good stuff, man. I mean, honestly, I think everyone's kind of seeing it now, but the media framing of stories, the way that we're told how things occur and what happens, and way things are like in the news cycle for like an hour and then gone or not even mentioned, it's unfortunate. So yeah, digging into some of these things that aren't talked about or kind of taboo to talk about, it's always a good time. And I think it's cool. I mean, a lot of people post military either kind of get away from the military altogether and go back home or whatever, just kind of get back into society and do their thing. And then some people use the military kind of like I do. I have a podcast and stuff like that that's obviously military focused. Some people go even hardcore, what we called it while we were in the motards, and everything is supermoto, like everything they do is supermoto and stuff like that. So did you you said you kind of wanted to talk about that stuff at first. Do you feel better now that you're like, you know what, I just don't really want to, maybe it comes up in natural conversation, obviously your military history, but are you glad to be focusing on something that's not on the stuff you've been doing for the last 20 years?
Yeah, because so obviously our training and our experiences, give us the ability to, or we think give us the ability to look at what's happening around us and kind of pick out what we see as very clear sort of, what we would refer to as like propaganda, right? And we would kind of point out how we see it like that. But as far as like that's about the most military that we try to attach to it, because neither one of us are, gun guys. We're not the everyday carry veterans. You're not going to see us on there with like, hey, here's my karambit, my flashlight, and my 45 that I carry every day. So I'm just putting my premeditation out there on the internet. Like it seems like the veteran community gets like pigeonholed and niched, and we almost kind of want to say like, hey, we did that, it helped to make us who we are, but it's not necessarily who we are 24 hours a day. It's because almost to me, I need a way to break away from that, identifying as that person, right? Because I fell for a lot of silly shit, basically, and they're while I was in, basically, like basically some of these information operations, like, hey, WMDs in Iraq. I'm like, oh yeah, cool story. Like, Sergeant Anderson was like, hell yeah, there are, and I'm gonna go find them and stop everything that's going on. And I like to consider myself a calmer, more enlightened person now. So it's it's not necessarily like I'm not that person anymore. So it's not who I'm trying to like present the motard, right? Like I'm not on here like, oh, good, like, hey, good to go airborne, like it's stinking daggone good to go trash. It's like, yeah, or even dudes that are constantly like air gunning stuff. Like, so there I was, like, peeling corners, and I'm like, what are you doing, bro? We're in the grocery store, like, relax.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to be one of those guys that's like on watch constantly. Like, it's cool to be ready to go, like be outside and like go places and like be prepared, like have a first aid kit in your car. Maybe you carry, maybe you don't, whatever, depending on the situation, but to be like constantly on guard, like something could happen at any moment, no way, dude. That's just too much for me. I try to take, like, obviously, again, my stuff's military themed, obviously, but it's more, I'm trying to make it more of like a historic, like, people, these are people's like stories and stuff. It's not like, I don't know. But yeah, no, that's good stuff, man. I think it's good stuff. I was actually listening to probably the only military one you have about the Afghanistan withdrawal.
Okay, yeah, we felt like we had to, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Marines kind of felt, as soon as the videos started coming out of the Marines like running into the airport, when the MEU guys got there, and you see the videos of all the Marines running out there to, take their place to protect the fucking place as it's going down. And then you start hearing about, then the bombing happens and the casualties. Everyone can relate to that, because that could have been any of us. That could have been any one of our friends, That's a MEU. That's like a deployment where you're like, well, nothing's probably going to happen. Like 99% chance we're just going to float around and be bored out of our mind the whole time. But they actually got the call,
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, so we that was one of the ones where, like, hey, we're just going to talk about military stuff. And we have talked to, I really actually like listening to you and Aaron talk, because, I've known Aaron since 2006, but, and we talk about crazy stories all the time. But to hear, you're a very good interviewer, so to hear you pull out, his, young Marine times to becoming a sniper, to becoming a force recon guy. That was really cool for me. But we figured we had to talk about the Afghanistan thing, just because it's like the dead dog under the rug. You're like, all right, fellas, like, it's a trip.
Yeah, it sucks. And it sucks when you, like, I don't know, man. It's tough for people that have been to Afghanistan to see that happen and be like, what the fuck, man? Like, I think a lot of us agree it was time to get out of there. Maybe they want to leave a small presence there, just to help them with logistics or whatever. I get that. But to have almost everybody pull out, I think almost everybody can agree on that. 20 years, like literally, if their military was like ours, their dudes could be retiring right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you're telling me at 20 years of experience, they can't do anything. So it's just the way it was done, kind of really pisses me off, and I know a lot of other people off. So
yeah,
anyways,
yeah,
we don't have to delve into that anymore. I do want to talk about, you were another pre 9/11 guy. And your time crossed into that post 9/11 period. So, one, what was it like to come to the fleet as an infantryman? Ready to go. Was there really anything going on at that time that you guys were looking forward to, or was there anything up and coming?
No, and honestly, I didn't go directly to the fleet, and that was because so my brother was a machine gunner in Bravo 17. It was right after Somalia that he got there, so it was like maybe 92 to 96 kind of time frame, And he was in 29 Palms, and I grew up in the deserts of Southern California, so high desert, Lancaster, Palmdale kind of area. Afro Man, Frank Zappa, and meth kind of place. So I would hang out with him on the weekends. I would either drive out there to 29 Palms and hang out with him, or we would link up in LA or something like that. And so I'm like 17-year-old, and I'm getting all ready to join the Marine Corps, and I'm talking to his buddies, and they're all like assaultmen and machine gunners, and they're like, dude, what do you like? so your brother says you want to join the Marine Corps. I'm like, yeah. And they're like, why? So, because, they were all salty Lance Corporals. They all,
For sure.
were in the peacetime corps. So they were just getting, broke off at range 400 for no apparent reason, that they could see. So one of them was like, well, hey, why don't you go do security forces? Like they actually do stuff, like they, at the time it was more like the fleet, the fast teams, the fleet anti-terrorism security teams were a little bit more high speed than they are now,
Yeah.
So that's what I did when I went into the recruiter. I asked him for infantry and the security force option, and so I went straight to security forces.
That's crazy because during the global war on terrorism, if you went to security forces first and then came to the fleet,
Yeah.
you caught a hard time from most of the people, right?
Yes, you did. Yeah.
Hey, can you explain why that is?
So so to the fleet guys, and I don't blame them whatsoever. They're out there locate, closing with, and destroying the enemy by fire and maneuver, and repelling the enemy's assault by fire in close combat. Right? They're using combined arms. They're getting on ships, and some of them actually did do contingency things like Kosovo, Somalia.
For sure.
So they look at the security force guys like, hey man, you're just out there doing fire watch. You're not out here in the fleet like actually doing anything. So that's kind of, and a lot of the guys that come from fire or security forces got, they're guard Marines, not MSG, Marine security guards. It's a different thing, right? So these guys are guarding like nuclear facilities. So for a lot of those cats, it's literally fire watch. You stand at post for 4 hours, you go on reoc for 4 hours, you try to get 4 hours of sleep, and then the whole monstrosity starts again, right? So they're a little out of shape. They're not staying up on their infantry skills. So by the time they do get there, I mean, we had a guy that came from security forces England, like straight to 29 Palms, and there was no, back in the day, there was no acclimatization. Like they don't care that you just came from a dark, murky island. They're like, hey, we're gonna go run in 300-degree weather, so
in the high desert too. There's altitude
in the high
sure.
desert, yeah, at 2,000 feet, yeah, and so the kids are just dying, and in the infantry, there's zero empathy, zero sympathy. At least most of the units that I was in, nobody ever took you to the side and was like, hey, we're going to help you out. It was just like, hey, shitbag, why aren't you keeping up? Yeah, so that's really where it comes from, is they get back to the fleet, and they're not up on their mortar system, they're not up on their machine gun, they basically aren't keeping up on MOS credibility, basically.
Yeah, they've just been practicing different SOPs and TTPs because the mission is completely different.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you like being there? Doing that security guard gig?
So I thought it was pretty interesting. So I got to boot camp, knocked that out. I graduated. I went in October of '98, and I graduated January '99. Knocked out the School of Infantry first. So I did the 0311 package, and then I became an 0351. So 3 more weeks of anti-tank assaultman training and demolitions. And so I got a security force training battalion. And it was pretty interesting, So we shot the pistol, we shot the shotgun, and we did a whole bunch of deadly force, escalation of force type stuff, and the final exercise where you defended a little mini embassy kind of thing. While I was doing this, at that training center, the Marine Corps Security Force Company Marine Corps Security Force Battalion Training Center out there in Chesapeake, Virginia, they ran their own CQB school, right? So a 6-week CQB school, everybody from the security force battalions from the companies would come back and do CQB there. And I got a chance to meet a couple of these guys when I was on this little loser cruiser bus that you would take from Chesapeake to the Virginia Mall, Virginia Beach Mall. And so I'm like, pardon me, Lance Corporal, because I think I might've been a PFC. So yeah, I'm like, pardon me, Lance Corporal, you're at Banger on the teams out there. Cause we called them the teams, the Recapture Tactics Teams or the CQB teams. And he's like, yeah. And so I'm like, oh, what's it like? He's like, well, we're on our 300th straight day of rain, so you probably want to kill yourself now. And that was like the welcome aboard package, right?
Yeah.
So I get to Banger, and they immediately put you into this thing called orientation, right? So you're in 2 weeks of orientation, and you have to memorize this guard manual by rote, right? Like the entire thing verbatim, right? Like deadly force, rules of engagement, post standing procedures, all this stuff. So I'm getting there, and I'm like, what is this bullshit all about? Like, this is like it's just 2 weeks of pure buffoonery, right? And so then you actually go into the wire and you start standing post. And one of the first things you do as a boot there is they stick you in a tower. So the towers, there was 6 of them at the time, I think, or they became 6. Basically, you stand in a 4-foot by 4-foot box, 40 to 50 feet up in the air, staring at the wire that surrounds where they keep the nukes for 4 hours every 8 hours. So it's basically like, I mean, they might as well put those kids on suicide watch. You know, it's like it's brutal up there. Like you can pick up the phone and talk to the other towers, but at any point in time, the corporal of the guard or the sergeant of the guard can also pick that phone up and listen to what these poor PFCs are talking about. So that turns into a nightmare on occasion. Or you could read your guard knowledge. You know, you'd be up there reading your 10th general order for the 50th time in a row. You know, so it's basically brutal. Like it was, and so that would go to the next post, which is, you were called a chuck. So when vehicles came up to the gate of the limited area where the nukes were kept, you would just be chucking them in, you know? So you'd have that stupid mirror with a flashlight looking for bombs, but like nobody ever told you what a bomb looked like. Like, hey kid, you're looking for IEDs or a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. I'm like, well, okay, what do those look like? You know?
You'll see it.
So yeah, you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So you know, I'm going through these posts and, you know, you have to like try out or take little tests and move up to the next post. But I'm also seeing these close quarter battles guys. So at the time, these guys still stood post. So they would stand there 4 hours of doing whatever. But then they didn't have to do all the other nonsense, like little stuff, because they would just go lay down because they were going to assault whatever building if there was an alarm, right? And they were actually doing the cool guy stuff that I saw in the videos. You know, they had the black body armor, they had MP5s, you know, they had pistols. They were like Marine Corps SWAT basically. So I was like, well, that looks like what the video looked like.
Yeah.
You know, how do you do that? You know, and they're like, shut up, boot. You're not doing anything, you know? So I'm like, okay, fine. So I kept being a good guard Marine. And so finally I was like, hey, you know, what's this thing over here? You had to volunteer for it. And so, they finally let me volunteer. You did like 2 weeks of what they called spin ups, which was, you just got hazed it was called the Recapture Tactics Teams platoon, which is like RTT. So the senior RTT guys would just haze the piss out of you for like 2 straight weeks. Then they send you off to CQB school, at which time you come back and you're just, when I got back, we didn't have to stand duty anymore. We were permanent react.
Nice.
So yeah. So by the time we got out to it was like a fire station. It was like imagine a fire station, but instead of fire trucks, there was a couple armored vehicles and like the guard Marines would be in there. We had like a bread van, an unarmored bread van that was like our delivery vehicle. It was hilarious now that I think about it.
It's like a movie. It's like off a movie.
Yeah. So after that, like we would just train CQB tactics for, you know, 8-10 hours a day. And then we'd have a couple of hours off to do your gym time or whatever. And then we would just sit in the room or sit in the day room, watch TV. So that was actually the cool part about being in security forces was I did like CQB for like 3 years straight.
Now, having done a lot of CQB later on, do you think that set a good base for you? Like, was that a good baseline for your like shooting packages and stuff that you would do, you know, later on in your career once you got into the fleet with the infantry, and then once you moved on to like special operations and stuff like that?
It really did, because it did a couple things right off the bat. Like the first thing it did for me was it let me know right off the bat, like, hey, you're not special and you're probably going to die, right? Like because, you know, we did a shit ton of sim on sim training, and some people don't like sims because they're like, oh, it turns into a paintball match. It's like, well, yeah, bro.
That's no shit.
Like, yeah, no kidding. So, you know, it dawned on me pretty quick that if you didn't breach or bang, you were rolling into a 50-50 gunfight, you know, like, we would get lit up all the time, you know, like we would use the basic.
And even if you win, you're still probably going to take a couple rounds in the process.
Yeah, so we would use the regular guard Marines, and sometimes we get the Navy to volunteer to be aggressors, you know. So even, you know, Joe Schmo, the Navy boiler mech could take 2 or 3 of us out, you know, if we weren't covering our angles. So the first thing it did to me was, you know, it kind of put me in a philosophical mindset of like, okay, this is not a joke. Like if I go through that door, there's a heavy chance that, you know, me or all of us aren't walking out of there in one piece, you know.
For sure.
And so I think that what that did is that ringed a little bit of the like any interior sissy I might have had left over, you know, like,
Yeah.
uh, it, and the next thing it did was you had to volunteer to get in that unit. So it really showed me that the more you volunteer in the military, the better and the easier your life gets, right? And that's like the riddle they don't tell the junior guys that are the terminal lances, you know, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you know, if you hang out with the dudes that are like, oh, it's just stupid, this is bullshit, well, then it's going to be stupid and it's going to be bullshit, you know. But
For sure.
if you look for the guys that are trying to push the envelope and to make it better, you're actually going to rise up, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
that whole I had a lot of people when I first came in and stuff like tell me they're like, don't volunteer for anything. It's like that's how you don't get fucked with, is just don't volunteer for anything. And I'm like, I don't know about that. I'm like, I feel like
yeah,
that's not really the way to like get out and do the cool stuff, because like I've said on the podcast many times, you have to kind of take control of your own destiny. It's the Marine
yeah,
Corps, and there's a set path. There's like a path that you have to go through to get to some of these goals, if you want to make it to whatever school or whatever. However, you got to open your mouth. Someone
yeah,
once told me back in the day, they're like, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. And I'm like, you're right, man. He's like, you got to speak up. If you want to go to a school, you want to send someone to a school or whatever, you got to say something. Because if I don't know you want to go or whatever, then how do I, And the
yeah,
people that volunteer for the bullshit stuff, it's like easier for me to go, hey, man, you've been putting up with a lot of bullshit and taking care of stuff when we needed you, so let's send you to this cool school.
yeah.
There's two
I mean,
schools
it
of thought, I
showed.
guess, on it.
Well, so for the first school of thought, if you go with that program into the Corps, for anybody that listens to this is going to join, um, you know, there are rails for your job, right? And what I mean by that is, like, if you join the 0311 path, just Marine Rifleman, right? To the system as a young Marine, like, you're on rails. Like, you're going to go from the School of Infantry to maybe Corporal's course to Squad Leader's course and if you don't, show a desire to do anything outside those rails, that they're fine with that. They're like, okay, cool. Like, we got you now. Like, we're just going to send you from point A to point B, Um, and normally within the Corps, which is an interesting thing that I'm not sure if the Army or anybody else does, like, they don't actually tell you that there's anything else. So until you see some recon guys, you're not really going to know unless, well, obviously nowadays you got the internet, et cetera. So I think Aaron covered this. Most guys know what they want to do when they go in.
Yeah, they're very specific about it.
Yeah, but even then, like, your platoon sergeant is not going to be, hey, random PFC. Like, you seem like you want to be a sniper. It's like you have to do what you said. You have to dive in and show that, hey, I'm willing to put in work, even if that work is I got to fill these sandbags, or if I have to lead this working party, or I got to do, like, if you show that you're willing to do basically whatever, not whatever's asked of you, obviously, but if you're willing to not be like, I don't really want to do that, because all the senior guys are like, bitch, what do you mean you don't want to do it? Like, what do you think I did to become a staff sergeant?
Mm-hmm.
Like nobody asked me if I want to do anything. Yeah. So it seems like it's better to go in and dive in and just be hungry for it.
Volunteer for, I mean, it's all experiences, man. And when I first came in, I was open contract and I was a mechanic, and it was like even worse.
That's brave.
There's no schools for that. There's like, I know, right? Brave/stupid.
Yeah.
I told the recruiter guy, because I thought I was going infantry until I got to MEPS, getting ready to go to boot camp, like on my way. They're like, so what do you want to do? And that's how I ended up in open contract. Anyways, I told the guy, I was like, I'll become a fucking mechanic. I don't want to do that. Anyways, so even as a mechanic, I'm like, oh, they have these like range coach schools. Like, I'll go do that. Or,
Yeah.
hey, they have this thing called a chaser, which shows I don't know what that is. That's a dude that goes to the brig. If you have a unit if your unit has someone in the brig, you take them places. It's like appointments and shit. Or they're the people that used to. They don't do it anymore. But at Camp Lejeune, every morning you'd see brig Marines walking the entire length of the main drag through Camp Lejeune doing police call. But for me, I was like, that's better than being a mechanic. At least I'm outdoors walking around, like doing something different, And it was so, yeah. I mean, take advantage of the opportunities, because this is the only time you're ever going to get a lot of these opportunities. As weird as you never know what the path is going to lead to,
Yeah.
So another question I have for you is, you talk about how it just sucks standing in the towers. Like, oh, fuck this, man. This this is garbage. You also went to the Defense Nuclear Weapons Response course, right? So you understand like a more full spectrum than most people of what happens if something happens with the nuclear weapons or nuclear capabilities. What could happen there? What would you say back to your PFC self to be like, I know it sucks, but it's actually important?
Man, that's a tough one, man.
Or do you think it's just not important? Fuck them. Get them off the towers.
Okay, I see what you're asking. That's a good question.
Because when you're standing there wasting 4 hours of your life at a time as a PFC,
yeah,
you're like, what is this for? Why am I doing this? No one's going to attack us, or no one's going to do anything.
I mean, I almost kind of agree with that now because, I mean, it is what it is. Nowadays they could probably automate the tower portion with cameras, right? But then you run into problems like, okay, fine, there's a blackout, whatever, somebody does a threat or an analysis of your position and wipes out the power plant that runs all that crap. Like, I mean, you actually do need a guy up there, that
last layer of security, of like actual security.
Yeah, and those things were bulletproof and they had gun ports that people usually pissed out of, so that was interesting. But because Corporal of the Guard may not come and relieve you for a head break in 4 hours, So, I mean, when worst comes to worst, I mean, there is a Marine up there with an M16 from an elevated position, who would at least cause some hate and discontent, because most of those kids up there are just waiting for that shit. Like, please, will somebody just walk through this wood line, in this 4 hours, like that. That'd be like the check in the box for my entire security force's life.
What was the reaction at the time? Because you were on security forces during 9/11. So what was like the, oh shit, something's actually happening to the U.S.?
This is kind of how it went down. I'd have to go back into like the old school calendar, because I think it was either a Monday or a Tuesday that 9/11 went down, because it was a Tuesday. Okay. Yeah. So I was on I was at my future ex-wife's house, spending the night with her. Okay. So I was, security force company Bangers on the Puget Sound, sort of in the town's called Bremerton. It's adjacent to Seattle, Washington. You can take a ferry across, and that's what I would usually do on Libo. I'd go link up with my future ex-wife, and we would spend the weekend together. So I'm like laying in bed with her, and my phone rings, and it's my roommate, who was one of our designated marksmen. So we were the CQB guys, and we had guys that went to designated marksman training. They carried an M14. They were like our junior snipers, so they would post up and get eyes on our entryway and give us the final data dump before we would move up and enter. So my buddy calls me and he's like, hey man, you got to come back to work. They bombed the towers. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, hey, they bombed the World Trade Centers. You come back to work. I'm like, who gives a fuck? They bombed it before, like, what are you talking about? This is New York. He's like, go turn on television. So I stumbled out. My wife at the time was going to college, my ex-wife, and she was living with her grandparents. So I get out to the grandparents' front room, like just in time to see one of the first tower fall. And I was like, oh, okay, this is clearly different. So I had a sea bag with me for some unknown reason. So I grabbed my sea bag, and because I was I think it was a corporal. So I throw my shit in my Bronco, and I go like speeding as fast as I dare to try to get back to Seattle to catch the ferry, right? So I caught the last ferry before they shut them all down for anti-terrorism stuff back on the Banger. We already had one platoon out in the wire, so those guys basically all stood to, wherever, just manned every available post, gate, etc. And then for those of us that were out of the wire, we stripped down the majority of our black CQB gear down into like greenside patrolling type stuff. Put our regular camis on, because we used to wear assault suits, which is like a flight suit, but it's got like a Velcro hatch in the back in case you want to take a dump or something,
Okay.
And it doesn't have like a 1970s collar. It's like a flight suit that's made for CQB.
Gotcha.
So we ditched those, put our camis back on, camied up. I need to find this picture. I got it somewhere. And we got put on LPOPs all around where they kept the nukes, out into the woods, right, to protect the perimeter fences of the actual naval submarine base. And they paired. The pairing was mostly a CQB guy and a designated marksman and a radio. So the night of September 11th, I was in an ambush position next to an exterior fence on Naval Submarine Base Bangor with my buddy Nick, who was a designated marksman. We had a radio. Man, we didn't have nods, like nothing, man. Like it was, like we didn't. There was nothing to expect or what to not to expect. I heard we went 50-50 halfway through the night because we're like, okay, well, like we can't even see anything out here. Like, so he's racked out, and I got the radio stuck in my ear. And I grew up in Los Angeles. I don't know anything about wildlife at this point in my life. And what we have been told about is the black bears around there, right? And like patrolling around that area is like triple canopy rainforest. It's the Pacific Northwest. So I start hearing this crazy like rustling and like this weird like almost like a moaning noise, and I'm like, what in the fuck is this, man? So I like roll my M4 over to full auto, because that was the good part about being a CQB. So I had an M4 with an aim point comp am and a Surefire light. Like I didn't have my granddad's M16, you know. It was my pistol had a light on it, you know. So I'm just hearing this rustling, and so I nudged Nick, like I'm like, Nick, you know, get up, dude. What the fuck is this? And he like pops his head up out of his poncho liner. And he's like, it's a raccoon, man, relax. So 9/11, like I'm sweating bullets on this LPOP, expecting who knows what to come out of the wire, and I'm like prepared to make contact with a raccoon. So that's my 9/11 experience. Basically.
we all have our 9/11 story. That's a different one than most that I've heard, though. That's a pretty good one, man. That's I always wonder, man, because it's a weird thing, you know, like being in the actual military when something like that occurs. It's got to kind of be like, oh shit, like this whole profession just got a lot more realistic than you know, I'm sure maybe not you, but a lot of people probably didn't anticipate like, oh shit, we're suddenly going to be at war, you know?
Well, it's funny. I mean, so some of our buddies had left security forces to go back to the infantry. And so they were some of the first guys into Afghanistan. And so we were kind of getting telephone calls, you know, email was still kind of new about, you know, like, oh man, you remember so-and-so? Like he shot his gun, like in real life kind of stuff. And then, I was of the mindset that we were going to be like the Clinton administration, like, oh, okay, like nothing's going to happen. Like,
we started hits and get out of there.
Yeah, you know, we don't have the stomach for anything big like that. And I was saying that up until the point that I got my Iraq deployment orders or Kuwait deployment orders in 2003.
You're like, oh, it's time, it's game time. So,
like, oh yeah.
So once you left there, then you went over. You came to the fleet, right, to 3-7.
Yeah.
So what was it like for you to check into the fleet, you know, from being security forces at the time?
So I didn't really I mean, it didn't seem like I was getting the rub that the regular security force guys were getting, you know. Mm-hmm. So when I got to 3-7, I became the weapons platoon assault section leader pretty much instantaneously. We had a staff sergeant in the weapons platoon, but he was like a one-up dude. We didn't have an officer. So it was like we were so short-handed at the time that there wasn't really a lot of friction as far as like, hey, a new security force guy, you know. And so working with the 0351s, I was a weapons platoon is, you know, you're in your line company. So that's going to be the SMA, which is like a rocket launcher, and demolition. So I became a breacher in security forces. So I'd been to breacher school in addition to being a 51. So I kind of knew, and I'd done breaching when I was out there. And being the stopgap for all things combat at the security force company when you're in the RTT platoon, I mean, I had shot, I don't even know, like hundreds of thousands of rounds through my M4. Like I'd shot probably more through my M4 than everybody in my weapons platoon, you know, like just is what it is, you know.
Just the nature of the job, yeah.
Yeah, it's like I mean, and with the explosives and with the tactics that we use in our CQB platoon, like I wasn't behind the power curve at all.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
So the reception was good at the junior level. What was not good was like the company staff. So the other platoon sergeants, and this isn't like a woe is me story, but like nobody was like, hey, new guy, you know, welcome to the fleet, just got here, you know, you're kind of a senior dude. You know, like nobody grabbed the new guy and put him under his wing. And so like my fallback was, or my mistake there was probably being afraid to ask questions, you know, because I didn't want to seem like I didn't know what the fuck I was doing.
Yeah.
So so that basically ended up with me and the other platoon sergeants kind of like bumping heads, and there was uh like a strange like, hey, fuck, the like sink or swim kind of thing, which I'm like, okay, cool, I guess that's a way to do it. And then so our platoon sergeant got yanked over into second platoon to be their platoon sergeant, which made me the weapons platoon sergeant. So I went from being, okay, I was assistant squad leader on an RTT team with like, 12 dudes at the most, and now I got 54, 52-ish mortarmen, machine gunners, assaultmen. So I was like, oh, okay, this is
And they get broken up all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, and they get breaking off, and
so
I was kind of
real quick before we talk more about what you did with the weapons platoon and stuff like that, we haven't had an assaultman come on yet. So can you kind of back up and tell us what an assaultman? So your job is what I actually wanted when I came in.
Okay, cool.
And then when I didn't get it, when I was fucking open contract and became a shitty mechanic, not shitty but an angry mechanic. Okay. When that happened, then I was like, man, maybe assaultman wasn't too bad, because the promotions were so horrible for assaultman. It was like, dude, 4 years, you're going to be a lance corporal at 4 years, and that's not uncommon kind of deal. Right. So can you want to explain what an assaultman is and what their role within the infantry platoon is?
Yeah, so the MOS, they got rid of them. The MOS is was 0351, and when I joined, basically your job was anti-fortification demolition. So they taught you C4, TNT, etc. Bangalore torpedo. So, in Saving Private Ryan, when they get up to the beach and they're held up at that seawall with all the concertina wire, and they start sliding these big tubes through to basically blow all that shit apart. Like, those would be the 0351s if they were Marines. They would call us up to destroy with demolitions whatever the fortification was. And so another tool we have for that was the Mark 153 Motto, which is the SMA, the shoulder fired multi-purpose assault weapon. So it's like a 153 millimeter rocket launcher, right? Reloadable rocket launcher. And so we would use what was called the HEDP round, high explosive dual purpose, to take out fortifications, buildings. And what that was just like 3-4 pounds of high explosives with a lot of aluminum in it to make sure it really went off. Inside of a rocket, you blast that into a wall, blow a hole, and the 0311s would go in, right? And then if you ran into armored vehicles or, enemy infantry fighting vehicles, anything like that, we had the high explosive anti-tank round, which we refer to as the golden dick, because when you took the cap of it off, there was a giant golden probe coming out of the thing. So basically you fire that thing at anything up to and including main battle tanks, so it's got a shape charge in it, and I forgot how many millimeters of armor it would punch through. So basically if the assault is stalled up because they got an enemy fighting vehicle or a tank is blocking the way, we would be the guys that they would call up to put an end to that thing. And then over in the weapons company, if you were in that gig, you got to fire. When I joined, it was the Dragon anti-tank missile, was like this antiquated Volkswagen bug of a missile, basically. So it had the main motor. If this is the warhead, it had like the main motor to kind of push it along, and then it had like a beehive of tiny little rocket motors all around it. I think there was like 36 of them, and it was fired by wire. So basically, or was it late? Anyway, so basically, each one of those rocket motors consisted of like a steer, right? So if I was slightly off target when I fire the Dragon, and I got to move it over here to hit the tank, and it fires like 15 or 20 of those little rockets to correct its flight, and then if you got to bring it back, it sounded like a Nazi buzz bomb. It was like, and they would misfire. Wild. They'd misfire all the time. They would just launch off and like down the range and land. And it was during this time that, like what you're talking about, these guys weren't getting promoted, but I was only planning on doing 4 years. So I was like, okay, I don't know what this promotion thing is you're talking about, so who cares, right? Mm-hmm. Like this just sounds cooler. But then they moved into so when I was in security forces, the Javelin came out, and the Javelin is a direct attack missile or a top down attack missile. It's like fire and forget, super high speed. The sight for it is one of the more advanced weapon sights that we have. So since that came out, they had to do a lot of shuffling around, and so the whichever it was, the composite score or the cutting score for 0351s just tanked. So like I was a sergeant in like 2.5. I'd have to check the math. Like maybe 3 years.
Oh wow! So you just missed it, huh?
Yeah, I didn't know what anybody was talking about. Like I just added water and I got promoted. It was like, I mean, I
Oh
had a good
man,
PFT. I was an expert in everything. I did my MCIs, and yeah, I just got promoted.
that's funny. Tracy Offit, who's been on a few times, was the old Anglo Coast Sergeant Major. Was
Okay,
started out as a dragon gunner. That was his.
really?
Yeah, he did. I don't know if he carried one in the Gulf War or what, but that's what he started out initially as, was a dragon gunner. That's pretty cool. It's funny because when you called it a Volkswagen Bug, that's literally what he drives. He's like that. So it's funny when I put those two together. Yeah.
I
Um,
wonder. I wonder. I saw that. I saw that episode, or him on that episode. I haven't watched it yet. I'm good friends with another guy with the last name Offit, who was with us in MARSOC, and his dad was a sergeant major. I wonder if that's the dude.
huh. I don't think so.
Okay.
Maybe he's got a son that's in the army.
Huh.
But shit, maybe maybe there's more kids out there I don't know about. Tracy, let
Yeah.
us know, man. Tell us in the
Yeah.
comments.
Cool.
So anyway, so now you're at 3-7. You know, you're in the thick of it. You're in the infantry. 9/11's happen. What's kind of, when you show up, when you get there, what's kind of the outlook for the battalion? Was there any deployments? Because for those that don't know, I mean, it's not like we just started going to Iraq right after 9/11. We didn't go to Iraq until 2003. So there was some time frame in there where guys really weren't doing anything but getting ready for what may come.
Yeah, you're exactly right. We were scheduled to do a UDP, so a unit deployment program, unit, whatever the P stands for, unit deployment. We were supposed to go to Okinawa. Our brothers in 2-7 were in Okinawa, and we were going to go relieve them and just spend 6 months doing whatever you do. Okinawa, probably hit a MEU or something.
Mm-hmm.
So what we were doing was just a lot of training for that. We went out, we did a lot of urban combat training out in the Barstow, Victorville.
Yeah.
We did CAXs. We did we ran range 400. It was just all this regular stuff. And going towards Christmas leave, we went on Christmas leave thinking that we were going to Okinawa. Like during this time, I started my Lat-move package from the infantry into EOD, like all the way back in security forces, because I originally had orders out of security forces to Hawaii, and then I got married, and the powers that be were like, "Hey, kid, if you want to go to Hawaii with your brand new wife, you got to extend for another year." Well, I'd already extended a year to go to CQB school and breacher school and all that. So I was like, "Hey, man, I'm not gonna have a 6-year first enlistment. That seems
Zero
silly."
infantry experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're like, "Well, okay, cool. Don't extend. We're gonna send you to 29 Palms." And I was like, "Runt, runt." Like, oh, well, that, yikes, right? So so when I showed up there, my brother told me all the infantry stories. It's and I keep telling people the root word of infantry is infant, because that's the way you get treated. It's like daycare if I don't know, prisoners ran a daycare or something like that. It's just nonsense, like wall to wall nonsense.
It's like 19 and 20-year-olds in charge of 18-year-olds.
Yeah, it's basically Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, and they have like all say over what you do, like your whole life. They, a 21-year-old can make drastic changes to the way you're living your life.
Yes, they can. Yes, they can. So I'd already started the Lat-move package to kind of get out of it, which didn't ingratiate me anymore to 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. Mm-hmm. And I actually got orders to EOD school in September of 2002. And I was supposed to cut from 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines to the base EOD team in like October of 2002. So I wasn't even supposed to go to Iraq. Like, I had no idea we were going to Iraq. I thought we were going to Okinawa. I had no plans on going to Okinawa. I was like, I learned about EOD guys as a breacher. I was like, what? This is a job? And then one of the times out of range 400, I saw these 2 Marines just like in boots and utes and skivvy shirts with like their own Humvee, just like chilling. I'm like, who the hell are these guys over here? I'm getting ready to storm this range 400 for the 15th time. And they're like, oh, that's the EOD guys. They're just going to sit over there, and when one of these things misfires, they're going to go blow it up. And I'm like, I know how to blow stuff up. Like, what am I doing here? So my Lat-move package got approved. And that's, the company was like, yeah, you're not going to do that. And I'm like, well, like, what do you mean? So I actually requested mass to get out of 3-7.
Oh shit.
And
that's always fun.
Yeah, so because I had the orders in my hand, I'm like, well, this doesn't make any sense. I got accepted to EOD. I did all the things. I showed up and did the interview, and the orders came through. It's accepted. I'm not supposed to. My MOS changed. My MOS on Marine Online or whatever you wanted to look it up in was no longer 0351. It was 2300 Basic Ammunition Technician.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm the Kilo Company Assault Section Leader with an MOS of Basic Ammunition Technician. I'm like, in hindsight, if I'd have been smart enough, so this is how it went down. So I kind of see that there's fuckery afoot, So the only thing I can think of is like, my company first sergeant was this dude named Francois, which I haven't talked to him. So I don't even, whatever, it is what it is. Like, but this dude was a former motor T guy, and now he's an infantry first sergeant. And he wasn't trying to hear anything I had to say, right? Company commander was kind of a wishy-washy dude. My new weapons platoon commander was like a brand new lieutenant. So, or actually, no, he was a prior sniper lieutenant. He was but he was a new lieutenant, but a prior sniper. So he's trying to he's trying to be cool guys with a battalion commander. Basically, they didn't want to hear anything about this kid's my order. So I was like, well, fuck it, man. Like, I'm gonna request mass. I kept hearing that this is the thing you do. So in my naivete, like, I requested mass to the battalion commander of the battalion I was trying to get out of. I had orders out of. So, of course, I go up and see this guy. Lieutenant Colonel Belcher was the dude's name. And, he just kind of looks at me like cross-eyed. He was a very interesting cat. And he's like, yeah, no, you're going to go to Okinawa with us. And when you get there, we might let you go do this OJT thing you want to do with EOD because, this is an infantry guy talking about OJTing with EODs. Like, I don't like, what is this OJT crap? This job sounds easy. I don't know what he thought, but basically told me to get fucked and kicked me out of his office. Mm-hmm. So I promptly locked the knee, traced the C, and got fucked right out of there, And so I don't know if I lost the trail of where that story was going.
Oh, it was just one. I mean, you requested mass, which a lot of people. So for the people that don't know what request mass is, that means you're asking whoever you request up to, it can be the first general officer in your command or whatever. It's an ability for anyone in the military within the ranks to air grievances or keep the command informed of something they may not be aware of. And so you can go to like the MEF commander and be like, hey, I got these orders. My unit's stopping me from doing it. I think this is not right. Can you make sure everything's legit? And if it's legit, then fuck you. You got to go back and do what they say. If it's not legit, if the command is not doing what they're supposed to do, then they're supposed to override them and, help you out. And
that's where I made the mistake is I stopped at the guy that I was trying to get past, because it didn't dawn on me to go to the MEF commander or the regimental commander or.
People have heard of request mass, but no one actually knows how to do it. And when someone says like, I think I might request mass, I'm like, it reminds me of The Office where he's like, I declare bankruptcy. And they're like, that's not it. That's not how you do it. It's like a formal process to do. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's allegedly like being a whistleblower, basically. There's not supposed to be any repercussions on you. It's like, okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, exactly.
So you think you're going to Oki, then you guys find out that you're not going to Oki. How was that? What was the reaction to that? I'm sure your families were not too happy when they found out that they were wishing you a farewell to Japan. Now it turned into possibly going to war in Iraq.
Well, up until recently, I didn't pay any attention to the ongoing narrative. So my ex-wife at the time had already heard some rumblings. She's like, "Hey, are they going to send you guys to Iraq?" And I'm like, "Nah, we're not doing that." Clinton was a sissy. He pulled all of our guys out. I had no idea what was going on in Afghanistan at the time. I thought SOF had already completely destroyed the Taliban in Tora Bora, and I thought that was done already.
Yeah, it was it was supposed to be like a quick in and out. We thought.
Yeah, it was like, they won quickly. Mm-hmm. So I was like, yeah, it's not going to happen. And she's like, I don't know if she was talking to the key wives or some shit. But sure enough, they're like, hey, they pulled us all in and like, yeah, we're going to go to Kuwait in like 2 weeks. Get your shit ready. And it's like, so we immediately went into, your alert, your pre-deployment alert, so it ran into like junks on the bunks. Everybody had to go get desert camis. This was right about the same time that the new camis were coming out, the digis. So like some guys had digis, some guys had brown boots, some guys had black boots. It was like a hot mess.
I'm sure first sergeants were losing their fucking minds about mixed uniforms.
Yeah, it was like Well, we all went in wearing like the old tricolor desert digis, not the chocolate chips, but the other ones. And then
Okay.
like halfway in, we could put on the digis if you had them, but then dudes didn't have name tapes. It was just like so we spent basically like 2 weeks going through the pain of getting the battalion ready to go to what we thought was Kuwait
getting
at
your
the time.
wardrobe right.
Yeah.
Gotta look good, man. When we're out there doing it, can't be looking like shit.
Got to look good. So, this is like times when I had a Lance Corporal that had been in for 8 years who's telling me he's got to go get a prescription filled. I'm like, yeah, cool, man. Go to medical, get your thing. I'm like, but hey, what's it for, by the way? He's like, Prozac. And I'm like, what do you mean Prozac? Like, how are you going to war with us if you're on Prozac? Like, just like just regular standard infantry shit like that, like amongst all this, I'm getting yelled at because some PFC came through the gate with an earring in. It's like,
real piece of shit out there.
Right.
And why weren't you there to stop it? Why weren't you there to stop it?
Well, First Sergeant asked me that, and I told him I was in base housing with my wife, where I was supposed to be, because I don't fraternize with the junior Marines. But
good answer. There you go.
Yeah. So, yeah, in short order, we get our atropine, our 2-pan chloride, or do we get that in Kuwait? Anyway, in short order, like, we're on buses and we're going to March Air Force Base. Like, it was pretty quick, and they're passing out live ammunition for the bus ride, because I don't know what they thought or expected. Like 2001 was a long time ago.
Just in case.
Yeah, just in case terrorists attacked this bus on the way to March Air Force Base.
What was the attitude of everybody on the bus? Of like, holy shit, dude, we're going to Iraq? Like, what's going on right now?
I mean, it was in the news they were saber rattling with Iraq over the weapons of mass destruction. And still in my mind, I'm like, okay, it's a big show of force. The Clintons bombed Iraq when I was in boot camp. I think it was like Desert Fox or something like that. They were doing a no-fly zone.
Yeah. So
I figured I was going to go out into I don't know what I figured. I think I was anticipating being out in the desert, some big show of force. The guy's going to capitulate. We're going to go home. Mm-hmm. Like, I did not think that the administration had the stomach to commit us to a war, man. Like, I was completely in naive, like, la la land.
And then it happened. And then
it happened.
And then you were crossing the line of departure. What was that feeling like when you were like on the truck or whatever, crossing into Iraq? Like, here we go, dude.
So it was a trip. So we got there in January. And so for January, February, and the first part of March, we just did drills in the desert, right? We walked towards the berm, basically. We would dig in, and then we would come back, and there was a bunch of other nonsense. Like, we would do ruck marches with the battalion. It was like being at CAX, basically. Mm-hmm. They would do scud drills where we would mask up, all that fun stuff. And up until then, like, it still seemed like this was just routine nonsense. Like, I was in what was called LSA 7, Life Support Area 7, which was near the main highway leading from Kuwait into Iraq. I forgot the name of that highway, but so we just figured that this was going to be kind of like some big CAX, right? So one evening, it was like, I forgot what time we heard it. So George Bush comes on, BBC, NPR, all that stuff, and Radio Free America, whatever we were listening to it on. Somebody had like a radio, and he gives that famous, like, Saddam Hussein has, 24 hours to, or whatever he gave him, 24 hours. What did he give him? 48 hours? Whatever. So when George Bush was saying that they had so many hours to get out of Iraq, we were already loading up the Amtraks. So we were a track company. So we were loaded up in AAVs, amphibious, whatever AAV stands for. Basically the worst infantry fighting vehicle you could possibly be in, right? Like
amphibian
almost
assault vehicle. Yeah.
Yeah, almost any caliber of weapon above like 7.62 will defeat this vehicle, right? And like the fuel tank is inside the troop compartment. Like all along the left side is like the entire, like, 500 gallons of diesel or whatever that thing is running off of, right?
Yeah, you're leaning against a wall of fuel.
And then the front wall is the engine. And then there's a 50 cal and a Mark 19 on it, but the turret can't traverse to the left because the troop commander or the vehicle commander's position is his cupola or whatever you want to call it is over to the left. So whatever genius designed this vehicle that can't shoot to the fucking left.
Well, I never
Like,
knew that. I didn't know that was. That's crazy, huh?
unless I'm totally
I've never.
mistaken, like, yeah.
So, excuse me. Sorry. Gosh.
Gesundheit.
Thank you. I've actually never been in an AAV. So.
Oh, you lucked out. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard it's not a fun ride. It's not a comfortable ride. And I imagine with a squad of sweaty ass dudes in mop gear cruising through the desert, it's not a fun ride either. What was that like? Just sitting there like probably praying to get out of that thing.
So how it went down was so George Bush says the word and we push towards the border, right? So we're on the border. We're digging in for like approximately like 24 hours. All the ammunition to further the nightmare of being in the track, all the ammunition for the 50 cal and the Mark 19 was on the floor of the troop compartment. Mm-hmm. So you couldn't even like sit all the way down. Your legs were kind of up. We had the center bench. So there's a bench on either side and a center bench. The center bench was all dudes riding backwards facing the ramp. And then all of us were like to the side. Well, the corpsman was a Vietnamese kid, and it's just funny, but like not so funny. He was sitting with his back all the way against the engine, and later on during the ride, he's like, Sergeant, I have to move. I am burning alive, because his like back is against like the engine, you know.
God, that sounds miserable.
So we get up to the border, and once again, it still doesn't feel like this is actually going to happen, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure you've been in a ton of drills where you're just like, this is like somebody's going to call this bullshit off, right? They're not actually going to send us over the border, right? Well, that night, I should probably preface by saying, like, we had the vaguest of plans told to us as to what we were going to be doing, right? Like, we knew that there was this place called Safwan Hill right over the border that was going to get bombed into oblivion in the opening salvo, and then recon was going to go up there and shoot everybody. So I figured that it was like an LPOP for the Iraqi army. Mm-hmm. So we figured maybe that would go down and that would shut the whole thing off. But so the evening of the invasion, like every artillery piece I'd ever even heard of started firing. And so you're looking up with your NVGs and you just see wrap rounds. You know what a wrap round is. Like you just see wrap rounds just like streaking through the fucking night, man. And like just nonstop. Like it never stopped. Quick funny story is I realized that we had built field expedient Bangalores to blow through breaches on our way in if we had to. Mm-hmm. And we realized that we didn't have any priming systems built yet, so we needed detonators, right? Because this is another stupid story. But so I hop out of the track. They were in hold down position, so it was dug in. The track was in a ditch, so only the top was sticking out. I jumped in that ditch to crimp some detonators. And I was using a red flashlight down in the ditch. There are hundreds of artillery rounds flying overhead towards Kuwait. Old first sergeant comes over and gets to screaming at me because the company commander sees my red flashlight in the fucking hole. And like, I'm going to give away the entire position of 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. Yeah. And I'm like bro, what are you talking? Yeah, bro, what are you talking about? Did you look up? You know?
Yeah, for sure.
So anyway, so we go screaming, like the engine revs, the ramp goes up on the track, and we go pushing forward. We went through the breach and we didn't hit anything. I'm trying to think if it was the first night or the second night we actually got a frago to actually do something. So the first initial part of the breach in Iraq, we didn't hit anything. We just pushed straight through and like just ended up in Iraq the next day. So you're like, oh shit, I guess we're here. One of the first things we did is we cleared out an old Iraqi artillery position that had been like bombed to shit. Who knows? You know, there's just a bunch of artillery rounds or artillery tubes sticking up all over the place. Mm-hmm. Our track actually hit a anti-personnel mine, right? So it sounds like a sledgehammer, like of huge proportions, slams into the fucking track, right? And it trickles down somewhere that, hey, anti-personnel mine, whatever, and we just keep on pushing, thinking somebody was going to radio that thing in. Well, 37's log train then pulled into that next and didn't get the word. And so I think the first 2 casualties of the war were our career planner in 37, and he was on like Oprah afterwards, and our I forgot the other guy, like the motor T chief or something, like lost a foot to a fucking anti-personnel mine.
Fuck.
So we're still not hearing much. We're still pushing north. And the first actual frago sometime in the middle of the night, like the lieutenant that's riding the track, like wakes up and yells gas down into the troop compartment because he, I don't know, thought he saw a gas round somewhere in a delirious. So we had a momentary panic where we're all trying to put every piece of our mop gear on inside the Amtrak in the dark. And finally we're just like, we just said, fuck it. So this whole period of time kind of blurs together a little bit. But so the next thing that happens that was of any import in that first like 36 hours was we got a frago to assault a building that had been given tanks trouble, I guess, for the entire day, right? It's now the evening of the evening in, I believe. My memory's probably shot on this, but so me and the squad leader in the back of so being an assaultman, the assault section leader, I was able to attach myself to whoever I wanted, right? I would attach out my guys, and then I would look to see whatever infantry squad looked to be the most competent, and then I would attach myself to them. I would just be like, hey, I had a gunner and an A gunner, but I was like, hey, you guys do your thing. I'm just going to stay over here and support you, you know? Mm-hmm. I'm not, do your gunner thing. So I'm thinking to myself, like, what kind of build, like what exactly are we going to do if the tanks haven't been able to dig these people out? So this is kind of how this goes down. So me and the squad leader in the back are like screaming at each other, trying to hash out this plan, right? So I'm like, okay, hey, check it out, man. As soon as the ramp drops, you guys get security set. I'll locate a breach point and blow it open with the rocket launcher. He's like, okay, cool. So, you can't tell anything back there. You're like in a steel box of emotion. So, the engines are revving, the thing's moving up and down. The ramp drops and it's dark night outside. The driver of the Amtrak used to talk a gang of shit before we actually went over. And, about being like a tough guy kind of thing. But as soon as that ramp came down, he was screaming his head off, like, get out so I can close the ramp. It was like, okay, guy. So we all go rushing out. We get online, drop down on this berm, and I see this building ahead of us. And I told my small gunner ahead of time, like, hey, look, I'm gonna strobe my laser. I had a PEC 2, I had a laser on my M16. So I'm gonna strobe my laser on what I want you to hit. Or I'm gonna put my laser on what I want you to hit, right? He's like, okay, yeah, cool, Roger. So we all go screaming out, slam down. I see a breach point on this building. It's just like a one-story, like, did you go to Iraq?
I went to Iraq, but I was a fob at the whole time. Yeah.
So like your standard Iraqi one-story, like brick building kind of thing.
Okay.
I see a front door. I put my laser on it. I looked down at my small gunner, whose name was Weldon. I'm like, Weldon, hit the target or hit the laser. And he looks back at me and he's like, which one? So I look back to the building and realize that now everybody's PEC 2s are all over the building. It looks like fucking lasers everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So I start strobing mine, and I'm like, hit the strobing one on the door, right? So Weldon puts the first rocket like dead center into the door, and the thing like blows up inside the building. When the smoke clears, I look up and the door's still on its hinges because it went straight through the door, basically. I'm like, so I start screaming at him to fire again, and this is my first experience with like the whole slowing down of time and combat and shit. Like, to me, it feels like this kid has taken forever with his A gunner to reload the rocket. So I turned to him to yell, because I think I told him to hit it again. Verbiage fucking disappears. Like, reload, hit it again. So by the time I looked down to him to scream at him to fire again, his A gunner was Johnny on the spot. I already had the new rocket in, and Weldon was hammering it again. So I was staring directly at the back of the SMAW when this fucking thing went off. So it felt like the hand of God just basically bitch slapped me to the side of the head.
Lesson learned.
From the back blast of the SMAW. So by the time I look back to the building, the door is like flipping end over end towards us now. So like, okay, cool. So the squad leader, Adam, he runs his guys over the berm into the building. And most of my stories of the first part of Iraq is a dry hole. It's like a lot of excitement, and then nothing happens. It's a completely empty fucking building.
Yeah.
So
hey, it happens, man. Hey, you know what? Yeah. It happens, but when you were putting those rounds into the building, you don't know that.
Right.
And this is your first like real engagement, right? So
yeah.
I'm sure the adrenaline was like boom, 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 boom. Like, I'm sure everything was just firing,
Yeah. Well, and also as soon as the first rocket went down range, we were the first gun team to fire. So as soon as the first rocket went down range, everybody else opened up. The 240s, the M16s, it was like they just fired like the FPF, the final protective fires real quick. They're like, so maybe it was good for everybody to get the nerves out of their system,
Yeah, for sure.
on an easy one, like, yeah.
So, were you glad that you finally got to, like, because you did security forces and all that other stuff, and you
Yeah.
weren't even expecting to go to Iraq. Were you glad to be there in that moment and, like, doing your job as an assaultman?
Yeah, because it was, we, in my mind, I was going into this place to liberate these people from this dictator, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and in every combat dude's mind, you have in the back of your head, like, am I going to be able to do this? Because you've heard all the stories, and you're like, man, okay, so it's game time. Like, am I going to let my guys down? Am I going to be able to perform in combat?
For
Like,
sure.
what's going to happen? Because I've seen grown ass Marines freeze in combat later on in life. So there's always that fear in the back of your mind that you're not going to perform in front of your guys, right?
Yeah, you don't want to
Which is,
let everybody down. You don't want to let your dudes down.
no, you don't want to get them hurt. You don't want to let them down. So, uh, initially I was just initially glad that I performed up to what I expected of myself. I didn't let myself down as far as, like, leading the dudes into combat that first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I initially believed in what we were doing, so it was like yeah, let's push forward and fucking liberate this country once we're actually in there.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. For those
Yeah.
that have never been in an Amtrak or understand kind of how that assault would have gone, there's a documentary. I don't know where it's at now. It used to be on Netflix, but I'm not sure if it's there anymore. It's called Severe Clear. I've recommended it on the podcast a
All
few
right.
times. There's an artillery officer. The first part of it's kind of goofy. He's like, this is like 2002, and it looks like he has like a home video camera, and he's like getting ready for the Muse. So he's like packing his bags and like, oh, here, I'm going to deploy my gas mask, But once you get into the actual, like, they're in Iraq and shit, it's a pretty fucking crazy, like, view of what these guys were doing. And I mean, he's doing call for fire from the track. You're watching the guns engage people from the track, and it's like, for someone that was never, I never rode in tracks, it's kind of oh, okay, I can kind of see how difficult that would be for different positions. Like, you guys, as soon as something happens, door fucking opens, you guys run out. For an artillery person, you're kind of stuck on that track, if that's where because that's where all the fire support's planning and approving, and all that shit is happening in the back of one of those. So for those that are listening, that's something to check out. I need to find, if anyone out there, because I know a lot of artillery guys listen to this podcast, if anybody out there knows the guy that made that documentary, have him hit me up. I'd love to have him on, because I've literally talked about his documentary multiple times on the podcast. So,
oh yeah.
Anyways, though, do you want to talk more about, like, the rest of that deployment? I know it's kind of hit and miss. There was a lot of, from what I've talked to other people from 3-7 before. Some of them downplay what they did, so I don't know how much you want to talk about.
Well, so for Kilo Company, we got an easy lane, I guess. Lima Company had their own lane. India Company had their own lane. And as far as Kilo goes, so we hit the Azubayar oil fields. Was our main objective as soon as we crossed the border, was to secure the Azubayar oil fields, and we were going to get relieved by the British. And as soon as we got relieved by the British, we were just going to push north to Baghdad. So we pushed north, and, like, you just saw crazy shit for the first time in your life. I saw a C-130 land on basically the freeway. It looked like they had either cut or blown down the telephone poles. And no shit, like a C-130 just landed on the freeway, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. We pulled over somewhere right across the border into just like this massive herringbone, which is just
pulling
Amtrak.
Off the road.
Yeah. And that was like one of the first times I saw the special operations guys, because they come up in like these Humvees that have machine guns sticking out of like every angle, like the doors are gone.
The GMVs or whatever.
Yeah, I didn't even know what they were called at the time. And they had a couple dudes in Land Rovers with them, and they were like in jeans, like button-up shirts and like chest rigs and M4s, and I'm like, and I'm wearing a fucking mop suit. These dudes are not wearing mop suits, by the way.
They look like they're on summer vacation having a good time out here.
Yeah, and I'm like, what am I doing wearing a fucking, like, what do they know that I don't, right? So we went north. We stopped at some concrete factory and to wait for our log train to show up, because we were so far ahead of our log train. We were basically like out of water, gas, food, everything. So we posted up there for a little while. We crossed through a town called Numania, which was basically on the edge of the Tigris River. There was a little bit of friction there, but nothing big. We had a pretty exciting night for one evening. Our platoon, second platoon, got attached with our tracks to a tank platoon and the CAT, which is the Combined Anti-Armor Team, which is the weapons company guys with the 50 cals, Mark 19s, tow missiles loaded up into Humvees.
Yeah.
So we basically made like a very small task force for an evening, and we were tasked with destroying an Iraqi military base, one of Saddam's palaces, and a bath party house, like in the span of like, you know, an evening and a day. And by this point, I'd already been up for like 3 days, so I ended up like staying up like 4 straight days in this particular time frame. So when we attacked the military base, we kind of posted up in this neighborhood. So like we're with tanks and tracks and these vehicles just like chilling in this Iraqi neighborhood, and it's quiet and there's dogs, and what we're waiting for is the airstrike and the artillery strike on the base to as preparatory fires. So finally the strike package comes in, they already strike it, and they bomb the shit out of it, and like we're like, okay. And then we just drive in there with the tanks in the lead, and then we were kind of sandwiched in between the Humvees and the tanks with the tracks. And basically we just drove through the thing with guns pointing in either direction, just like laying waste and like a rolling attack on the way through. Like I saw more tow missiles fired at that night like than I'd ever seen, you know, because those things are expensive as fuck, you know. Like it was one of the things like the honor grad of the 0352 school got to fire the tow, you know, or like if you won corporal's course or something, you got to fire the tow, you know, like so those things are just slinging off everywhere. And once again, that thing was a dry hole. Nobody ever shot back at us.
So what were they shooting tow missiles at?
Buildings.
They're just like, fuck it, take that one out.
Yeah, recon by fire. Anything that looked like it could possibly hold an enemy fighting position got hit with Mark 19, 50, fucking, like you name it. There's, what's the Abrams? A 120? Like the Abrams were shooting.
And when you say that, you mean like what you can distinguish as like a military target. Like you're on a base, right?
Yeah. We passed through a gate, and it was like it was, although it had multi-story buildings, like some they look like maybe 5-6 story buildings. Mm-hmm. Like it was a legit base. You could see like everything you would think from seeing an Iraq base, guard towers.
Yeah. You weren't in some neighborhoods. Grounds. This isn't something you were like in Iraqi neighborhood slinging off tow missiles. So for the people that may take that the wrong way.
Yeah. Yeah, basically nobody was there. It was once again a giant dry hole because they'd all surrendered, you know.
Yeah.
So we make it through that, and we drive further on into the night, and we pull up. By this time, me and my other the squad leader, this dude named Adam Sanchez, who was later also in MARSOC, we would sit on the roof. We would open up the hatches on top, and we would sit up there. It was called being an air sentry, right? Or it was called I outrank everybody, and I'm gonna fucking sit up there, like. Yeah. You know, he's a squad leader and I'm a sergeant, so we're going up. Everybody else gets to suck down here. So we kind of got the bird's eye view of all this. So we pull up next to this giant like 12-foot wall in the middle of the night. It's like open farmland to the right. I have no idea where the fuck we are. Lima Company, 2nd Platoon, is also with us. So you know, we get like the radio signal to bring the leadership up to the front. So we come up to the front, and there's an Abrams tank. This is dark, and I'm viewing all this through 7 Bravos, you know, single monocle garbage NVGs.
Yeah.
There's a Abrams sitting in front of what looks like a palace gate. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess we're at the palace. And I can see a soft guy with the 2 eyes talking to the tank commander, right? They're having some sort of conversation back and forth. The tank commander gets in, and I can hear the tank engine spinning up, right? So we all sort of pile up against the wall. So like our 2nd Platoon is against the left side of the wall going into the compound. Lima Company's on the 2nd Platoon. They're on the right side. So we're kind of going to do this kind of number, right? So the without any warning, the Abrams just drops it into low gear, high gear, whatever, and smashes through these gates, right? Well, it sounds like an explosion goes off. I'm like, oh, fantastic. Some anti-tank missile just smoked this fucking Abrams, and we're going to go running through there. But what happened was, there was a gatehouse directly behind the gate. The Abrams smashes through the gatehouse and high centers onto the fucking gate. So literally, as I go, we go storming through the breach. I'm running past this Abrams that's like Dukes of Hazzard in this shit, on a gatehouse, and the tank commander is screaming for somebody to pull him off, right? So we go running in, and I'm expecting Saving Private Ryan, man. I'm expecting green tracers to just start taking us out as we're going through the breach, because this crazy shit just happened.
Yeah.
And as I'm running in, I keep like tripping over shit all over the ground. Like it looks like I'm in a garden of some sort. I see a building off to the end. So there was no plan of what the inside of the building looked like. There wasn't a GRG or like a grid reference guide. Or, there was nothing, right? So
yeah.
We find a building, we seize it. In those days, once we went white light, we just left the white lights on, and we eventually found the light switches. So we're in one of Stom's palaces, and it looks like a 1984 Ramada Inn or something, right? There's like VHS players, like it looks like Miami Vice, but it's 2003. Total dry hole once again, right? So I go walking outside because I'm gonna start getting like a head count, and I realized what I was tripping over is the thing had been hit by like a 2,000 pounder. Like they JDAM'd this thing. So there was like a school bus sized crater in the middle of this thing. And what all of us were tripping over were like basketball sized pieces of the fucking rubble that came out of that hole. So that goes down like that. Then we link up, we get back on the tracks. We keep pushing again. We link back up with the soft guys. This is all the same, like nighttime, like no sleep period. And at dawn, we're going to hit a bath party house and a police station. Like, okay, fine, great. Like by this point I'm like delirious and as far as like lack of sleep, I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. So we go driving in now, and now it's just two of our Amtraks, and it's a GMB and a Range Rover, right? So now we're just in the middle of Iraq somewhere with two Amtraks full of us and these soft dudes. So me and Adam are sitting up on top again, so we kind of see this thing go down. We go down this street that's like a T shape. I guess the police station's on the right and the bath party house is on the left, or vice versa, whatever. The bath party house is on the right. That's what the soft guys hit. So they go pulling up, and they kind of set the pace for us, because as soon as they were in like any kind of vague like little L shape, the dude on the 50 cal and the GMV let loose this burst that had to be like a whole can, because like,
hell yeah,
the windows, I could see like pink light coming out of the windows from all the tracer rounds that were inside, that were going in the building. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess we're doing this the hard way. So, we there was an abandoned building next to the police station that we were going to attack. So we went up to the top of the abandoned building and started launching 203s down into the police station. Like, nobody ever told us the police were bad. It was just, this is just how it went down, right? So luckily the police station was also a dry hole, because it had also been hit by a bomb on top. But basically all of OIF 1 kind of went down like that, to kind of put OIF 1 in a nutshell. Like the final thing that we did that was kind of big is we assaulted this the Ministry of Intelligence building. It's like a 13-story building that kind of mushrooms out at the top.
Okay.
And the real short one with this too is everything was like a Frago. Everything was super fast. It was like, hey, today we're gonna cross the bridge into Iraq, or into Baghdad, and we're going to hit the Ministry of Intelligence building. Like, okay, cool. There was a bunch of combat engineers that they brought up and attached to me. I was like, hey, how you doing? Good job. Like, what do you guys know how to do? They're like, oh, we have some donut charges and things. I'm like, okay, great. And so the rough plan, and I don't even remember being briefed this plan, I don't even remember how I know this plan, was that the engineer tank, you ever seen one of those things? It looks like a little bulldozer blade.
Yeah.
Like a stubby little engineer tank.
I can't remember what it's actually called. It's like the MEV or the MIV or something. Yeah, it has the Miklik charge in it and all that stuff. Yeah.
So that thing was going to ram a hole in the wall, and then we were going to go in.
Okay.
So we load up in the Amtraks, and we're going into Baghdad, or going into Baghdad. Somewhere over the radio, somebody said that ambulances and taxi cabs were going to be used as vehicle-borne IEDs. So on the way in, you could just hear random gunfire everywhere as people are like lighting up taxi cabs and shit. Like, go back to just random gunfire. But so we approached this Ministry of Intelligence building. I see this 13-story building coming up, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'm about to attack a 13-story building. That's good thing I did all that CQB, right?
For sure.
So the first thing we do is we pull up to the wrong side. We pull up to the wrong side of the building, and you see TOW missiles are getting shot up into the upper floors. Our track is shooting it up with a Mark 19 and a 50 cal. So we come back around to the other side where the engineered track had punched a hole in the wall, and I bring my my SMAW gunner up because I'm like, hey, look, I'm gonna turkey peek into this breach and get you ready to fire the gun, right? So I turkey peek around it, and there's a massive open like courtyard. Next to the 13-story building is a little two-story building that's like the admin annex, and that kind of feeds into the 13-story building. Our platoon got tasked with taking down that 2-story. I noticed that the front doors were glass, so I'm like, fuck it, don't worry about it. So we just start charging across this big open field. And as I'm running, you know, it's like in a nightmare. You don't think you're running fast enough. I'm looking at this 13-story building, and once again, I'm just expecting fire to come down from that thing, and we just start tumbling like in Saving Private Ryan, you know. Doesn't go down like that. We get right up there, and long story short, the entire thing is a 13-story dry hole. They spent hours going through there with sledgehammers, beating every door down, like, and the whole thing was empty. But
I'm sure they pulled some good intel out of it, though.
Later on, I'm sure they did. Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's just, you know, that was your job as a Marine and during the invasion was to basically be the sledgehammer to go through and bust into stuff and make sure everything's legit after the air power goes through and takes out some like key infrastructure and stuff like that. It's interesting.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned the police like station. You guys attacked it, and you were like, "Well, we don't know. We don't even know if they were bad or not." You know, it's like, what do you do in that kind of situation? Because I imagine if a foreign power attacked the U.S., they would see police stations as, you know, an enemy, like something that needs to be taken care of because those are armed.
A problem.
Yeah, those are armed people. So, what was your take on, like, you said you're from Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
How was seeing that culture compared to like your upbringing and your own reality of how you've lived your life and the places? I don't know if you've traveled before you did anything before that. What was it like? What was it like going to the Middle East and seeing that culture of how they live? And you saw, because you were part of the invasion force, you saw the country and the city side of Iraq. What was that like for you?
Well, so one of the first nights that we kind of went strong or whatever, we stopped and we set up a defensive position, was in the Azubayr oil fields, and it was like, you know, maybe 3 days into it, maybe not, it's hard to tell. But so we woke up, you know, we got there in the night, we dug in, and the sun comes up, and you're like, you start to realize, you know, what's around it because you got there at night. And what it turned out, what it looked like was just a bunch of villages, and there was an army barracks up the ways a bit, and everybody had deserted and fled and ran away, dumped all their uniforms. So there were cars going up and down the road that, you know, I put the SMAW gunners next to a road in case tanks come, you know. So I'm kind of chilling out next to the road, and cars are going by that have been looting the army barracks. So they're coming with mattresses. I mean, they stole everything that wasn't nailed down, and then the folks with claw hammers got the shit that was nailed down, right? So we're just kind of chilling out. Well, one of the machine gun section leader had just come off of being a recruiter, and prior to that, he had been a sniper, right? So he had like some little scope that he had bolted onto his M6 A2 service rifle. And we get the word from somebody. There's like a weird berm around us. We get the word that there's people moving in the field with an RPG, right? So I'm an assaultman. I'm like, hey, let me go look. There's an RPG. That's probably something I should know about, right? So I go over there with the rest of the 2nd Platoon and kind of look over the hill or the little berm, and it's literally like 3 kids. It's like a 13-year-old boy-ish and like a smaller boy and like a little girl, and they have an RPG, but it's just a launcher. There's no rocket in it, right? Well, old recruiter Axel starts falling back into his sniper days, and he's like, he tells somebody to like, he says range me to somebody. I distinctly remember hearing range me. I'm like, what the fuck is this guy talking about, right? I haven't seen him since, but I had a 3-power magnifier for my NVGs, and you could use it as a single binocular until you put it on your NVGs. You know, it's just a weird little three by magnifier. I haven't seen him since.
I've never seen that before.
Yeah, it was for the end of the 7 Bravos. You know, so I'm looking over there. I'm like, there's no rocket. So I tell the platoon commander, the 2nd Platoon commander, I'm like, hey, so there's no rocket in that launcher, man. I don't think you want to start the war off with war crimes like on our first op, right? Mm-hmm. And why don't we just patrol over there and take it from them? And so we end up doing that. And so that was my first experience with the locals. Is we walked over there. You know, everybody's terrified, and you're looking at them and you're like, these are just people, man. Like, these are people like your family, my family. They're farmers. They got geese. You know,
Mm-hmm.
even if Iraq was involved in a war on terror, it wasn't these people.
For
You
sure.
know, it was one of the young kids spoke English. You know, so he
Oh
was
wow,
help.
really?
Yeah, so he was helping us. You know, he was very polite, and he brought everybody out. And at the end of it, I felt like an asshole, man. It was like, uh, it was, you know, we basically disrupted these people's lives in a very like shocking way for essentially no good reason. And I guess it was better than, you know, ex sniper shooting the kid. But so
Yeah,
basically
I
we took,
mean, yeah, that
yeah.
would have been tough.
Uh, I mean, so we took the launcher and just ran it over with the track on the way out. But that dawned on me that, you know, and it really resonates with me now, is like, you know, the for the most case, even if the people believe in some sort of propaganda, even if you're talking about Afghans who are like diehard Pashtuns, don't like America, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like when you're face to face, they're just people,
For sure.
and the majority of them aren't fighters. You know, it's they don't want no piece of fighting. You know, and they're not gonna fight you. Like no matter what somebody tells them, they may be like, oh, I hate America, but they're not gonna take up arms. It's just it's odd for humans to rise to that level of aggression. You know.
They're just trying to live their life. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what dawned on me was meeting them at first is and that kind of OIF 1 was a trip because we interacted with the locals a lot, and then in
Mm-hmm.
OIF 2 it was completely different when I got there. It was like there was no interaction whatsoever. It was we were into the insurgency in that point.
For sure. Well,
Yeah,
let's talk about. Well, before we get into that, I'd like to talk. Like, I just wanted to mention that's an aspect that a lot of people don't realize. You know, is like we talk about China as the greatest enemy for the U.S. and stuff like that, and it's not the individual Chinese people.
no,
It's like the government. You know, and it's
yeah,
unfortunate that the individual people kind of get wrapped up in some of the stuff, and here in the U.S. too, there's people that hate the U.S. government so much that they'll fly fucking planes into a World Trade Center. But none of those
yeah,
people were involved in anything that the government was doing. But that's the shitty part, and that's something that I think to probably not lose your mind and maintain some kind of slice of humanity. You
yeah,
have to look at situations like that dude within all his rights to shoot that kid because he had an RPG launcher in his hands. Could have done it. No, I mean, people could have been upset about it, but legally he was within his rights to do that because
yeah,
he's holding a weapon. But common sense has to come into play, like like what actually occurred, which I'm glad that's what happened. And it's like, hey, what are we doing? Let's just go over and get it from the kid. Like why do we,
yeah,
why would you want to smoke some kid? And anyone that would be eager, I'm not saying he was or anything, but anyone that would be like eager, like they're ready to smoke some kid, I'd be questioning them, from then on out
yeah.
anyways, because I'd be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah, it's like I thought you're supposed to be tough. You're worried about a kid with an unloaded weapon. Like,
and
are,
I don't know if you saw it when you were in Afghanistan. When I was there in Sangin, well, no, it was in Marja is when it first started. The Taliban were giving kids toy guns to play with to
yeah,
try to get Americans to shoot them. And I
yeah,
distinctly remember one of my scouts, one of my 0861s, was standing post one day, and he came back and was like, dude, some kid pulled a fucking like golden pistol out and pointed it at me on post. And he's like, I almost shot him. And then, he's like, I didn't. And then they sent someone out to get it, and it was a toy. And I'm like,
yeah,
fuck, dude, man. Like, and that's the shit. Because if you smoke one of those kids, it's not like, hey, the kid had a toy weapon and he made it look like it was the American killed that kid. That's why we
yeah.
got to get rid of him. Yeah. It's fucked, man. So,
And
go ahead.
it was probably a benefit of all the escalation of force training in security forces. I mean, I had all the justifications for deadly force and the deadly force definition memorized verbatim. I can still rattle this shit off. So, and your entire time in combat, you're basically looking for people to fit the mold, right? It's like hands, whole body demeanor. So I do take that as a benefit from being in security forces. I was able to look at that and be like, yeah, this is not anything. This is, yeah.
Yeah. So between this deployment and your next deployment that you finally got to do your EOD fucking lat move. So for those that don't know what a lat move is, in the Marine Corps we call it a lateral move. It just means you're changing jobs. So I changed jobs. I did 3 years as a mechanic, and I changed from 3521, which is my MOS, motor team mechanic, to 0861, fire support man. And that's just all that is you go back to the basic school. So you're the sergeant. Not, I don't know how EOD is. I think you have to be a sergeant to move into that. But like for me, I was there with like PFCs and privates and shit. So you want to explain kind of what I had a friend, I think that was looking at lat moving into EOD. And the way they ran it at the time was if you were looking at coming over there, they would bring you over to do what you were talking about, the OJT on the job training for a couple weeks. One, to see if you even liked it, and two, to see if they thought you would fit in that community. Is that kind of still the same kind of gig?
Yeah, because during that time, EOD was a very small MOS. It still is, but it was even smaller. It was approximately 300, just shy of 400 total. That's officers, everything, right? So it was really tight knit, and that was really the purpose of like the OJT and the interview. I mean, I'm sure they finagled it within the Marine Corps order for some other reason, but basically it was like a good old boys thing. Like they wanted to bring you in, get a sniff test, like see if you were EOD material, right? Did that answer your question?
It did. And I also want to point out that you did this, you put in this lat move and stuff right after your first deployment, to Iraq. So during the invasion. And at this point, like IEDs weren't that big of a threat yet. That wasn't really a thing. So being an EOD was probably completely different that year than it was 5 years later. I'm sure you saw, I mean, you're still doing that kind of work as a contractor. So I'm sure you've seen some crazy advances in bomb technology, like all that stuff. Because I don't know what you can talk about, can or can't, but whatever you could talk about for your schooling, like kind of how the schooling went. Maybe any advice you have for people that might be trying out for EOD or thinking that's like the right field for them, because this is one of those jobs where I've seen like the recruiter almost tries to talk you out of it because they need you to understand
they probably should.
They need you to understand the seriousness of the job, and like there's a reason why it's got one of the highest bonuses.
So I get back on the advance party from 3-7. They're like, hey, you got orders in August, so you're going back on the advance party. So I'm like, okay, great, thanks. So get back, long story short, PCS, permanent change of station, over to Eglin Air Force Base, Florida, which is where the joint EOD school is. It's called the Naval School of Explosive Ordnance Disposal because the Navy has primacy inside EOD. So it's a Navy school. It's a Navy school on an Air Force base that all services go to. So you get there, and everybody runs things a little bit differently, right? Like, so in the Marines, at the time you had to be an NCO to go. So we were all sergeants. Army was a smattering back and forth. Navy was mostly NCOs, with a couple, senior. We had a chief with us, which I thought was weird, but and the Air Force, they send straight up boots. They send people right out of Lackland basic training, and they're still kind of in basic training inside EOD. So EOD school is broken into, I forgot exactly all of the stages, but basically I started at the time. It was the first time that they did this. Like they were trying to get more EOD techs through, I think, at that time. So we did night courses. We went at night and we learned to use this computer system called ADOPS, which is the I'm going to be a terrible EOD tech. It's like the Advanced EOD publication system. So inside this system are weapon schematics for pretty much every weapon that we've ever got our hands on, right? So like if I want to, if for some reason a mortar is stuck in the wall right here for some unknown reason, right, I would go over to the mortar, get close to it, look at it, figure out what kind of mortar it is. And I would go into this computer system, which this is way before Google and all this other cool stuff. So, or maybe Google was around then, whatever. This military computer system didn't work off of it. It was like individual disks and shit.
Oh shit.
So you find out how the fuse would work, right? So, all about fuses. You got your point detonating fuses, your VT fuses, or variable time or proximity, and there's different things to consider with that. So This test, there's a test on this computer system, and it was kicking like people's asses. So basically, that's why we were doing this thing at night. We were practicing using this computer system and figuring out how to find out what this stuff was. So then the first thing you do, I keep wanting to say stages, but there's like phases basically, right? So one of the first thing you do is like ground phase, and they teach you how to start to identify ordnance, right? So like, hey, this is what makes a shape charge ordnance round. This is what makes a high explosive round. This is what an incendiary round, like incendiary rounds are mostly like thin skinned or small, like if like a fuel air bomb or something like that. So really you just start getting it from the fire hose right off the bat. And we had a couple people quit almost immediately, right? So I'll probably get the phases wrong now for any current EOD guy that went through this, but so it basically goes like ground or ground recon, where they teach you how to recon ordnance that's laying on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, EOD gets mystified a lot, but to be completely honest, for all my EOD brothers out there, we're garbage men, like straight up. Like everybody, because I was a grunt before I became EOD, so it didn't mystify me, right? Like I knew I was becoming a pogue. I wanted to become a pogue. I was tired of doing grunt shit. I was looking to be the lazy guy with the hand grenade. That was waiting to blow up the hand grenade at SOI, right? Like
sit on the side of the range.
Yeah, I thought I was getting out of the infantry, right? So,
yeah.
And I was already a demolitions guy. Like I just got done blowing up tanks in Iraq, right? I was running around with detonators in my pocket, and I destroyed an anti-aircraft gun by lighting the fuse with a cigarette one day because I was out of fuse igniters. So I thought I was the coolest kid since fucking John Wayne at that time. But so the first phase is ground recon. You learn how to safely approach ordnance items and start to do measurements to find the diameter. Because if you can't just eyeball it as a 155, you would use calipers, because it might be a 120, it might be a 105, and it might be a Russian 156 or some shit, So that's the first thing you do. Little things will get you kicked right out. You memorize a whole bunch of safeties. They're called safeties, right? And they're just, the whole thing is LARPing, right? Live action role playing. So there's a dummy artillery round on the ground, and the first thing you have to do is memorize these safeties that are going to keep you alive while you're dealing with this artillery round. So one of the first things you memorize is what you call HE frag, EMR static. So these are things that are going to kill you. So HE, if that's a high explosive round, you tell your instructor, hey, I'm claiming HE, which means that I'm going to set up a safe distance, 300 meters away with frontal and overhead cover. And he's like, okay, cool. Yep, you got it. Check in the box. And you're like, okay, frag. It's a heavy case munition. It's an HE round, so there's going to be fragmentation going everywhere. So, we need to clear out 2,000 feet of a bubble for safe fragmentation or whatever the safe bubble is, right? He's like, okay, cool. EMR is just electromagnetic radiation. You want to be you want to be careful with any sort of spurious electricity around ordnance items, because some of them have electric fuses, right? So if you keep EMR as a safety, you can't touch the ordnance item until you equalize potential by touching your bare skin to bare ground. Now you can touch the ordnance item because you've equalized your potential to it. If you touch that fucking thing without discarding or without telling the dude, like, hey, I know that thing is not electric, I'm not observing EMR, unless you LARP that out and you go over there and you touch it, that's minus 16 points. See you again tomorrow. Mm-hmm. Every test in EOD school, you got to get an 85 or higher to pass. And some things that you fuck up are 16-point hits. So after ground recon, you go into demolitions. You start learning. You get out of that stupid 8-ops test. You do an 8-ops test. There's usually a test every week or so. I forgot the exact number. There's something like 50 of them or something like that. It's a shit ton. You go from there into demolitions, where you basically actually start blowing stuff up. Just little stuff. They're like, hey, this is TNT. You got to memorize all this, blast speeds and everything. They'll take you down to the range, let you set off one block of C4, one block of TNT. Everybody's like, ooh, and I'm like, oh, whack. And I'm like,
yeah, you've already been blowing up stuff. So
yeah, it's like I blew up a tank 3 months ago. What are we doing?
I've seen better.
Yeah. So a buddy of mine who later on ended up in MARSOC as an EOD tech got dropped out of there for dragging det cord across the ground. And I'm like, oh, okay. So after demo, what's after demo?
Is it real quick? Is it like, so like at TCP school and stuff like that, the safeties you're living off those safeties. If you fuck them up,
Yeah.
and there's a reason for that. You know, they may
Yeah.
seem very basic, but it's because if you fuck up that basic step, there's a good chance that you could kill someone, you know, that's not supposed to get killed, or kill yourself or whatever.
Yeah, like for you guys, you know, if your bearing is off, you could be, or for some reason you give our grid instead of the enemy's grid, you know, shit goes bad fast, right? Like,
Yeah, there's a lot of shit. You can't be too dyslexic when you're passing information for dropping a bomb.
I used to always tell my guys, there's 3 people on the team that can never lose their cool, right? Like, obviously the team leader and the team chief kind of go without saying, right? But even if they lose their cool, it doesn't really matter because we can just keep on pushing. The 3 dudes that have to be cool as the other side of the pillow are the medic, the JTAC, and the EOD guy. Because if any of us are working, it's the fucking worst case scenario, right? Like, somebody's injured. Yeah, we need somebody to not be injured, or we need a medevac, or we need a fucking gun run to stop us from being injured, or, you know, we have an IED, we have a weapons cache, like, so these 3 guys have to be, you know, the level-headed dudes on the team.
Which is why those safeties are so important, and they're you know, they're ground into your memory from day one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, long story short, the EOD school is you progress through a series of weapons, building up to finally nuclear weapons, right? So you learn demo, you learn how to do ground ordnance, which is like artillery shells, landmines, hand grenades. They'll lay out 15 hand grenades and tell you how each one works on like Tuesday, and then Wednesday you have a test where they just put 3 like a shit ton of random hand grenades out in a lane. There's like 10 of them, and you have to go through and be like, okay, that's a signal grenade because it's smoke. The safeties are cock striker because there's a spring in there that's gonna make it strike, and fire, you know, because it's fucking hot. Out of ground, you move into air ordnance, which gets a lot of people. Air ordnance is like missiles, bombs, cluster bombs, ejection seats. Like we work on ejection seats, and I know a guy that was killed by an ejection seat in Iraq. Some arrow somewhere, or a squadron commander wanted an ejection seat out of a MiG to like put in front of the Al-Assad little post that they were chilling out at. So these 3 EOD guys went out to some Al-Assad area where this MiG was chilling. I'm not even sure how they got the ejection seat out of the MiG, or if the ejection seat was already on the ground. But while they were loading it into a truck, there's a lot of the ejection seats are a lot of the things on them are fired by drogue lines, right? So there's like a line attached to the airplane. The rocket fires the ejection seat out. That line catches on something and fires something else, you know? Mm-hmm. So as they were loading the ejection seat into the vehicle, one of those lines got caught and fired the entire seat and killed a dude.
Jesus, dude. All for a fucking like trophy to sit in front of a building, man.
Yeah.
What a fucking waste. Jesus.
So
stupid.
You go through all that in air. After air, somewhere I forgot, in ground, chem and bio used to be in ground. So we went through chemical and biological weapons training in the ground division, and part of that is you have to do like this obstacle course in your MOP suit to seal up these chemical rounds and all this other bio shit. You go through air. Air leads into IEDs, and when I went through IEDs, the IEDs they were talking about were like pipe bombs at abortion clinics, or like some Vietnam era like grenade with a fucking tripwire, you know, like there was nothing to prepare me for like 15 155s daisy chained on a road, right?
Yeah. Strapped to the back of a guardrail.
Yeah, suicide vest, you know, like so we did the IEDs, and then after IEDs was nukes, and nukes basically taught you, you know, the difference between like gun type nukes, which is like I'm trying to remember if that was Fat Man or Little Boy. I think the first nuke was a gun type. Basically, that's like when you have a donut shaped piece of like fissile material on this side, and there's like a solid shaft of other fissile material on this side, and when they ram together, usually via an explosion, they hit critical mass. They're not critical mass when they're apart. When they're together, it goes critical and goes high order. So you learn a gun type nuke, and then you learn the pit type nuke, which is what our shit is now, right? Which is like your spheres of plutonium with all the charged shaped explosives around and to basically implode it down into from a big sphere to a little sphere, makes the chain reaction, you know. And mainly what that's teaching you how to do is be on a response, right? So all over the nation, they ship these things all over the place. Like, it would probably alarm people if they were to know, A, how many nukes are just in transit at any given time, and B, like, how many broken arrows, a real term. Like, anytime you lose physical sight of like where this nuclear weapon is supposed to be, even if inside the bunker it's in slot 1, when your record says it's in slot 2, but you're like, okay, same serial number, the forklift driver just put it in slot 1, like, that's a broken arrow. Everything from that to they accidentally dropped one off the coast of Georgia into a fucking swamp, which they just found not too long ago, right?
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, they found it. But
the amount of nuclear mishaps is kind of staggering. Like,
it's
stupid shit happens all the time. And the most recent thing was when they were putting the information online as a study guide. They were creating. They have those free. They have those websites where you can create your own study guide. But
flashcards.
But it keeps it up there for the public to see. And they were using that to practice where they were storing the nukes. Like, come on, man. Like, come on, man. You're making it too easy. How much of an idiot are you?
So yeah, that's pretty much it. You graduate nukes and then you go off to your duty station.
So you went through a couple. You know, I'm looking at your school list here, which is quite long, by the way. For those, I'm not going to go through and read all. You've been through a shit ton. I mean, at least 4 or 5 more EOD courses, like advanced classes and stuff. So are these different? Are you checking, like, are you going to classes to learn something very specific about a very specific kind of? Okay, so you want to talk? I don't know what. Again, I don't know what you can talk about with it.
In order to progress through being an EOD tech, you start as a basic EOD tech, and that's like our for anybody they can Google image the badge. You know, the basic EOD badge doesn't have any wreath, it doesn't have a star, it doesn't have 2 stars. You know, it's like a progression of badges, like going from silver wings to gold wings, right? There's things you have to do. So you come out of school, you know, slick badge, dude, you basically don't know anything, according to them. And you have to do, there was a list of MOS progression schools for EOD, and it's fucking long. Like, I know, you know, probably as an admin clerk, the progression is probably like advanced admin clerk school, a B billet. I'm probably being a jerk. There's probably more schools they have to go to, but
yeah.
So for us, it's long. I mean, there's some of those schools are on there, like FBI large vehicle post blast, where you go in the desert and the FBI blows up a dump truck, like literally 2,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate in a dump truck. They'll blow it up, and you spend the rest of the day collecting the parts and pieces of it until you find the bomb that they used, right? So to become a senior EOD tech, when you get your first little star on your bomb, you have to do 4 years as an EOD tech. You have to go through 4 like officially MOS EOD schools, and you have to spend 6 months deployed as an EOD tech doing EOD stuff. So that gets you your senior badge. And then to become a master badge EOD tech, you needed, this was during the time period that I did it, you had to do another 4 years, another 4 of those schools, and another 6 months deployed doing actual EOD stuff. So that's what actually led to a lot of those schools, and a lot of them were I didn't get a ton of training basically until I got to MARSOC. When I went to Phantom Fury as an EOD tech in 2004, my entire training was like one sort of advanced electronics. It was actually AT Solutions, like advanced CBRN IEDs. So IEDs that involved chemical weapons, and this was actually in Okinawa, right? So one of the problems was a guy came in there was a chemical incident at this area. So we had set up a hotline, you know, everybody's getting washed and cleaned as they come out of this chemical environment. And one of the bodies that they pull out has a suicide vest on it. So they call over the bomb guy. And so in the training, I got to put on the mop suit. And then I put on the bomb suit.
Oh God.
So mop suit, then bomb suit. And then I put on an SCBA, so the firefighter's oxygen backpack. So I'm wearing probably 95 pounds of shit at this time. And you got to go over there and basically peel the I mean, this is LARPing again, but you got to peel the suicide vest off this guy in chemical suit, in a bomb suit, and that was basically that particular training.
Okay.
But as I progressed, a lot of it was heavy into defeating IEDs of all sorts. I mean, we always trained to what I started referring to as like Hollywood bombs, because some of these schools would get a little ridiculous. You'd show up at this problem, and it's like fucking Keanu Reeves in Speed, right? Like there's like 4 motion detectors pointed at this fucking thing, and there's a countdown timer on the outside of it that could be fake, maybe it's not. Who the hell knows? Like, and there's like 15 trembler switches inside of it. It's basically like a fuck you problem, and they're all like that. But then when you get down range and you find a pressure plate, you've already trained to defeat, this crazy movie bomb, and this pressure plate is like one switch, a battery, and a detonator. So you're like, but it can almost fuck you, because you almost get to analyzation paralyzation, right? Where you've done all this crazy shit in training, so I'm expecting like, okay, this can't just be a pressure plate. There has to be a pressure release. The board itself is probably tied to a pull line, where when I grab the board up out of the ground after I cut the wires, there's probably a thread going to a grenade. So honestly, I mean, who knows, man? Like in my olden days, I almost think some of that training probably got guys wounded by having them go off looking for all this crazy shit that they did in training,
Well, so that was going to be one of my questions. Okay, so I remember doing a raid. It was supposed to be a IED, a dry hole. It was a dry hole, but it was supposed to be an IED maker's facility, like a compound. And I got tagged on to come out and be the FO during that. And I had the EOD guy. I was sitting there bullshitting with them before we got on the helo, and I just met the guy and everything. And when we land, we get everything set. Now we're going to go through, get the cordon set. We're going to go through and sweep through. I'm kind of tagging along with him and, kind of checking shit out. And I'm looking over, and this dude's just poking everything with this fucking K-bar. And I'm like, all right, man, I'm going to go over here. And it seems like some EOD guys, I don't know. Do guys get too relaxed, do you think? Because
yes,
there's been a lot of EOD guys killed with like not the reverse pressure, but the release. Like when you think you're taking the pressure plate, okay, I got the pressure plate off, but it wasn't actually a pressure plate. When you lift the bomb up, there was like a release trigger underneath it. That's killed a few guys. So how do you keep from becoming like too like, whatever, like cowboyish, like I'm going to poke everything with my knife and see if it blows up, kind of.
I think being a grunt first and going to combat first. And so when in OIF 1, because I'd already lat moved and I was already a basic ammunition 2300, and I already had a backpack full of explosives, like my company thought it was basically hilarious to call me up every time we found weapons caches and things to destroy. They're like, hey, get that wannabe EOD guy up here. So my fitness report from OIF 1, like I'm credited with destroying like shit tons of weapons caches, like shit tons of armored vehicles, like everything I would later do as an EOD tech, like I'd kind of already done, And I took the lessons in EOD School to heart, because one of the portions of the ground section is landmines and booby traps, basically. And you're taught very delicate procedures, because an IED is just a booby trap, right? Like we got hornswoggled by this IED thing, right? Like the Department of Defense like went off the rails on this IED shit. It's like, hey fellas, this is a fucking booby trap. Like if we were dog-faced soldiers in World War II and we bumped into a Nazi minefield, we wouldn't wait 17 hours while some fucking EOD Jeep showed up. We would go around it, or we would blow our way through it, or you'd break out a knife and start handling business, but so probing for an IED is no different than probing for a mine. Like I used a very slender titanium mine probe, right? That broke down into multiple sections. It would like screw together. It had basically think of like an ice pick on steroids, right? And like this ice pick, you basically rest it in your hand, like very gently. And as you're sliding it into the earth, so any like major point of friction that it runs into, like pushes it up your hand instead of going further, right? That's the right way to do business. Like very methodical. I used to tell kids all the time, younger EOD techs, like, look, dude, you got the rest of your life to do this right? Right? Like, you have this could be the rest of your life. So don't fucking hurry, man. But these old EOD techs that were the salt dogs, the crusty old crabs, when we got in, they didn't have any combat experience. Like some of these dudes were, maybe a dude went to Grenada, maybe he had some crusty old dude from Panama, maybe there was a guy with the Force Recon when they were in Somalia, like they didn't, and they were kind of cowboys, A lot of old EOD techs had what I call like the range knife setup. There's an official EOD knife. It's called a Mark 11, and this thing weighs 15 fucking pounds. Like it's like an inch thick blade. I mean, it's like a ridiculous like tool, right? It looks like the Rambo 2 knife or some shit. Yeah. And they'll wear that thing on their hip and in like a setup where it's got like a Leatherman on the pouch and a cap crimper and a cap box, and it's got like 5 rolls of fucking electrician's tape. And that's almost like a badge of honor to old school EOD guys, right? Like, I got my thing and I'm ready to go out on the range and I'm gonna do stuff. So that's where a lot of guys got that. Well, I'll just, I'm not gonna be a nerd and like I'm still in school and break out a mine probe and a straw that I'm blowing dirt away from a fucking mine with. Mm-hmm. I'm a cool guy now. Like I was a bulk fuel guy yesterday, and now I'm an EOD guy. So now I'm gonna bust out this fat ass knife and I'm gonna Rambo my way through this shit. And they got fucking killed, man. Like it is what it is.
Well, and I'm sure there's pressure too from whatever command you're supporting.
Yes, there is.
Where they're like, "Hey, come on, we got to get through this. Come on," and you're like, "Bro, if I fuck up, that's it. Like that's it for me." So like, I'm trying to do my thing.
Yeah. Later on in MARSOC, when I was a warrant officer and we were building the selection, the recruiting is, you're not allowed to call it a selection. The recruiting and screening for MARSOC EOD techs, we built a scenario that was a no-win scenario. And the entire purpose of that scenario was to get the prospective young MARSOC EOD tech to say no to the on-scene commander, right? Because the Marine Corps order on EOD is MCO 3571.2 hotel or some shit, whatever they're on now. Well, in the third paragraph, whatever, the 3 section, the operations section, it lists out EOD responses, and this is all unclassified shit. It's all on the interwebs because we like to put our entire doctrine online for other countries to read. So, yeah. So inside that order, it gives you response categories, right? Category A is like, hey, Justin got caught by the FARC, and he's got a collar bomb around his neck. So Cody, no matter any safety to my own personal being, I'm going to move in there and I'm going to start working on that collar bomb with you. I'm taking my gear off. I'm putting my iPro on you. I'm putting my helmet on you to make you feel better. I'm going to risk my life to get that thing off your neck. Like that's category A. It's like life, limb, eyesight. The bomb tech is ready to end their life to save the other person. Category A. And it goes down to category D, Delta. So B is like immediate sort of operational needs where you probably should risk your life, right? So like, say for example, we're at some FARP somewhere and a fueling place for folks for a FARP, right? Like some place where we've got a bunch of fuel bladders. Yeah. And say like the enemy launched a rocket at us and that rocket's sticking in the ground amongst all those fuel bladders. And we got helos coming in that are medevacs and they need to refuel because we need to save guys' lives with these medevacs. Like, okay, bomb guy, get your ass in there and get that rocket out. That might be like a category B. And then C is like, hey, a rocket landed near post 7. The Marines go to post 7 all the time. It's within the blast radius of the type of rocket it is. Next time you're not doing real combat shit, can you go out there? We got it roped off, can you go out there and get it out of there because there's still Marines around there and who knows what that thing is doing, And these are very broad category or very broad generic examples. Yeah. And then category D is basically every single IED in Afghanistan. Category D is like, hey, on the ridge line overlooking the green zone in Nowzad with nothing around it for fucking kilometers, somebody found a pressure plate IED because the Russians parked up there and they think you're going to park up there. So they put a pressure plate up there. We're not going to go there. Nobody's going to park there. Like that thing can sit there until the dinosaurs come back and it's just going to rot away. Nothing's going to happen to it. And routinely guys would get blown apart fucking with those bombs. And it was maddening as like an EOD officer later in my life, because I would get all the reports when I was in Afghanistan 2012, 2013 as a Special Operations Task Force EOD officer. I'm looking at these like IEDs that people are fucking with and getting killed. I'm like, dude, that thing is in the middle of nowhere. Like, what made you go over there? Kind of shit. Yeah.
We had when I was in Sangin, there was a couple spots where it was like, hey, this is a known IED belt. Like, we're not going to go in and fuck with it. No. It's there. Just know it's there. We have no reason to go over there. So it's exactly what you're talking about. Like, hey, it's known that it's there, and we all know it's there, but just don't go over there. It's kind of, we don't have time to deal with that, because the actual threat, is the fighters and shit, not that one spot that we're not really. We did have an operation planned, and it was like, hey, we're going through the IED belt. And we're like, fuck, this is when I was an advisor. So it was my little advisor team and then the Afghan Kandak. And I'm like, man, this is not going to be good. Like, this is going to suck. And then it started raining. It was like really early. It was like super early in the morning. We were going to go do this mission. And then it started raining, and the Afghans were like, it rains today, cancel mission. We're like, okay, darn it. I don't have to go through the IED belt today. Duh.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, that's one of those gigs that a lot of people, myself included, like when I was looking for lat moves, when I was in Motor T, I'm like, well, I want to lat move into something cool. Like, I've been doing Motor T, and it's like, I don't even feel like I'm in the Marines because I'm fucking turning wrenches on Humvees all day. Like, I want to do something cool. And EOD was one of those schools. And I think a lot of people look at that as an option. And I remember talking to a guy who failed out of the EOD class, and it was probably an earlier class, kind of like around your time frame. And he was like, dude, I kind of felt bad. He's like, and then I think he was a staff sergeant in the infantry. He's like, but now I look back, and half the guys I was in class with died. He's like, half those dudes have died in combat from getting blown up by IEDs and shit. He's like, so I'm really upset I didn't get to go into, that field, but at the same time, it might have saved my life tonight. So what is that like within that community? Because it's got to have an effect on the morale, when someone gets killed or something like that occurs. Like, it's a serious job with serious consequences.
I think what it does is drive most people to, well, not most, I'll say my peer group, I would say that 75% of us were clinical alcoholics. Like, nobody would ever admit it. Like, of course, in your yearly medical screening, your post-deployment or pre-deployment, it's like, oh, how many drinks do you have? Like, oh, I have 2 beers, no more than a month. I have 2 beers, no more than 3 beers in a sitting, no more than.
Yeah, we all know the answers to the questions.
Yeah, but that is not the case at all. I mean, dudes are polishing off, handles of shit to get to basically, and it was just a it was a cultural thing in EOD that you were basically a fucking drunk. And so that's how a lot of us handled it, man. Like I had basically consigned myself to dying in the infantry, so it wasn't totally new to me, the fact that I could get, killed. Mm-hmm. There was guys that quit. There was a couple guys that turned their badges in, some of the legacy guys who were kind of like EOD guys in the, late 90s into the early 2000s, but then shit got real, and it's like, oh, hey, this is like 2004. I know at least one dude that quit. And then you get guys that start to, I guess, dodge deployments. There's areas in EOD that you can go to hide, right? Hide, whatever. I don't care if that makes people mad. Like base EOD team. So for example, the 29 Palms base EOD team, right, has no responsibilities to anything but what's on the base. So, if a rocket misfires somewhere off on some range, like, they're going to go do that. So you run into guys who all throughout the years of the war went from like base 29 Palms to base Pendleton to base Lejeune, or, they get hidden in like instructor billets. They'll go to the base, to like Defense Nuclear Weapons School, to EOD School, to some other, guys that just through some, creative monitor work just never seemed to find their way back to the pointy edge, you know. And then there was guys that were just like amazing EOD techs, man. That just you know, just disarmed, you know, 300, 400, 500 IEDs, and they were just on it, and it didn't phase them, you know. Whether they had strong religious beliefs or they had strong family beliefs. At the time, I didn't have strong religious or family beliefs. So I was an alcoholic. Which
hey, you got to do what you got to do, right?
Yeah, man. It was like it was just how you dealt with it. I mean, that's how I dealt with it. I'll speak from personal experience. Like,
that's one of those jobs where your life is on the line every fucking time.
Yeah,
like
it's
every
like,
fucking time it could be it. Like you can't mess around with that. And then I think it's really hard for people that have never been in a job where the seriousness is that high to kind of understand that. And then on top of that, so the Marine Corps allows sergeants to become EOD tech. So you're talking 22 to 24-year-olds that are now the weight of responsibility of going out in front of everybody. This whole platoon or whatever is waiting on you to walk up and fucking figure out what kind of bomb that is, disarm it, and get rid of it so they can continue on. That's a lot of responsibility for a 20-something-year-old kid, you know?
It's huge.
And then try to come back from that. And my problem, what I think I've kind of, problem, I guess, I don't know. Getting out of the military, I'd look at other shit like, none of this fucking matters. Like, none of this, like, I don't get worried about stuff. Because I'm like, dude, I've been in so many other, like, really, really, like, stressful situations, or really, like, you know, life is on the line, or like if things would have went one way instead of another, like you could be dead kind of situations, where now I look at the stuff that people get mad about on their day-to-day lives and stuff. I'm like, whatever, man. I don't even care. Like, it doesn't matter. Life's more important than that, you know?
Yeah. Like, I'm inside. We're not getting rained on. We're not getting shot at. Nothing's on fire. Like, what are we upset about? Like,
it's a different perspective, man. It gives you a different perspective on life when you've gone to the edge. You know, you've towed the line of the edge. You know, you've been so close to the edge of getting yourself killed or whatever.
Yeah. And
you've stepped back from it. Everything else is like, whatever, man. I'm just enjoying the ride now. Like, it's all gravy.
Well, another negative effect that it had on me was, and I went to the TBI clinic towards the end of my career, and there was one of the exercises they had you do is, you know, you sat in the room with this very nice lady, and she hooked you up to a biometric kind of scanner, and it was like something on your finger, and it was like something on your earlobe.
Yeah.
And did you do this thing?
I went to the TBI. I did the same thing. And for real quick, before you tell the story, for people getting out that went to combat, like, I never reported anything. And I was like, before I get out, I want to go to the TBI clinic just to make sure that if something is wrong, it's documented. You know, I want to go more than just telling my corpsman at BAS. I want to go down and have the professionals actually check everything out before I get out. So I think that's a good idea for anybody that was in combat situations where explosions happen to do something like that. Sorry.
I mean, even from basic training, I mean, the like, real quickly, the DOD pays basically zero attention to concussion as an injury, right? So, like, you throw a hand grenade, if that thing lands close to you in the School of Infantry, I mean, that's a mild concussion, you know, like pugil sticks, you know, McMap, you know, you like concussions are like the other don't ask, don't tell, basically, you know, is inside the military, like, anyway.
Especially for guys like you that did like breacher course and stuff like that, like pre-EOD. You know, that's almost a common school for engineers and recon. You know, there's a lot of people that do breacher stuff, and that's really bad.
So I think what it lends itself to is the same, like, CTE type things that, like, NFL players get. Because there's a massive amount, not a massive amount because they get swept under the rug, but there's disciplinary problems amongst EOD techs. Like, I'll just speak for myself. Like, to reinforce what you said about, like, after you, hey, look, man, like after you disarm an IED with your bare hands, like, the rest of life kind of has a gray film over it for a little while, you know. It's like, just like you said. So the way it manifested for me later on in life was, like, I would do risky behavior. So I'll go to that ear thing, right? So what the lady at the TBI clinic explained to me was like, hey, you and all your buddies, like, she showed me what was like a normal physiological baseline, right? And then she showed me mine, which looks like at the time looked like a fucking Richter scale or something. And she was like, "This is normal over here. Like you and all your combat buddies, like you guys are sitting in that chair like you're experiencing a car accident, but you haven't done anything. Like your physiological response is all out of whack. Like you're constantly in some sort of fight or flight, right? Like, so since I had gotten so used to like living in like this extreme crisis mode, like when I was home, it would almost be like I would look for things to invent that level of crisis in me. It was like I couldn't. It was it's something as stupid as like driving with your seatbelt off, because I was just like, fuck it, what does it matter? I'll just go through the windshield. It doesn't matter. Like what difference does it make? To like like stupid alcohol related shit. It's just it was
just introducing chaos into your day-to-day life. Yeah.
It's you're so used to, being put in that extreme position that when you're at home, it feels like you almost start to get, some sort of panic mode if something horrific isn't happening.
Mm-hmm.
I
used to, when I was in college, I would always wait till the day that a paper was due and start writing it that day, just because I work better under pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would sit there and bust out 1,000 words or whatever, whatever the requirement was. Usually, almost all my papers I wrote in one day because I like that pressure of, I don't know why, and it's so stupid. And it was something like I would tell myself, I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself? Because it's a lot of pressure. When I would be like, literally one time I remember submitting a paper 1 minute before the due time. And I was like, whew, that was a close one, but I did it again the next time.
It's that same thing in combat, that burst of PKM fire goes by and you're like, what the fuck was I thinking? And you're like, oh, okay, I'm still good. So you invent that crisis yourself,
Yeah, for sure, man. All right, man. Well, so I want to talk more about like your EOD time. You were in Phantom Fury, you were in Fallujah and all that stuff. I think we'll have to wait for, do another episode. So what I'd like you to do, if you want to plug your podcast again or any social media, anything like that you want to throw out there, and then we'll wrap this up.
So if folks want to find us, they can go, we're trying to switch all of our content to Rockfin. So, we talk about stuff that is likely to get kicked off YouTube at any moment. They really haven't messed with us. We've been saying that for a while now, and they really haven't hit us on anything. But, we talk about current events, and you can find us on YouTube at Stranger by the Hour podcast. We're trying to move everything over to Rockfin. Rockfin is another video hosting page. You can find us on Rockfin, ROKFIN, Stranger by the Hour. Instagram is Stranger_pod. And I think those are the big ones. Oh, on Minds. So Minds is like another like Facebook-esque type place that's not Facebook. I don't even know who owns it, but Stranger by the Hour on there as well. So basically if you look on Minds, YouTube, Rockfin, Instagram for Stranger by the Hour, you should bump into us.
Sweet, man. And then for everybody else, my Instagram is @FormerActionGuys, @JKramerGraphics, both of those. My website's jkramergraphics.com. Hit me up there. For the people that are listening to this before the holidays, none of my shit comes from overseas, so don't worry about it coming from months later. Go ahead and get those orders in though early.
Oh, your T-shirts and whatnot.
Yeah, man. All these people.
Awesome.
I saw a meme today that was like, American-made products don't have a shipping issue, and I was like, ooh, that's a good point.
Oh yeah.
So that's good stuff. So yeah, check my shit out. Check that stuff out. Thanks again, man. We'll have you back on the show. Have Aaron back on the show. And
awesome.
Get into the rest of your guys' career. I hope being on this podcast is helping, bump you guys up and giving you a little bit more exposure and stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. I love your show, and thank you for giving us this opportunity. And it's great talking to you, man. You do a great job.
I appreciate it, man. All right.